In front of a high school, Lu Yun, the principal of Zihai First Academy, is giving a speech to the student who had spent 3 years mastering the theoretical knowledge of the profession system. And today is the day the students would awaken their profession. Lu Yun was a man of few words, but he hoped all of the students could reach the same level as their senior Su Kaingsing and become a pillar for the human race. The other students were feeling the pressure, however the protagonist of this Manhwa Lin Moyu was different. He had been waiting to receive his profession from the moment he was reincarnated into this world many years ago. When he reincarnated, he quickly realized that this world resembled a video game, with dungeons, secret areas, and monsters. After getting a profession, you can gain experience points by hunting monsters in dungeons. This in turn increases your level, making you stronger. Countless ancestors gave their life to carve out a living space for humans among the monsters, and led to the humans' current way of life. The most popular professions in this world were the combat classes. Support class professions were next in line, followed by livelihood professions. The combat class and support class were divided into 5 ranks: low, medium, high, rare, and legendary. The rare and legendary rank professions were extremely rare, and the entire Zihai city has yet to produce someone with a legendary profession in 10 years. The transmutation circle was activated, and Principal Lu Yun with a paper of the students' names was ready to begin. Suddenly Gao Yang tapped Lin Moyu on the shoulder and asked him what profession he wanted to awaken. Lin didn't answer, so he went first and told him that he wanted to awaken the knight profession since it would fit his physique, and he could protect all the ladies. Lin didn't like to talk much, and because of his academic achievements, he had gained some haters, who were hoping he would awaken a profession from the livelihood class. After Lin walked away, Gao Yang defended him, telling the haters that Lin didn't think he was better than everyone, he was just a man of few words. Principal Lu Yun turned to Master Zhang, a level 52 formation master, and thanked him for taking time out of his day to help the students. Zhang replied saying that he didn't mind, and Lin, who was watching closely, was stunned to see a master with a rare supporting profession. Soon, with the list from earlier, Principal Lu Yun started reading the names of the students. The first student he called was Zhu Da. With his name being called, Zhu Da entered the transmutation circle, and after a flash of light, Zhu Da was assigned the livelihood class farmer. However, a livelihood profession wasn't what he was hoping for, and after stepping out of the transmutation circle, the students tried to comfort him, saying that the farmer profession wasn't a bad one since it could be upgraded to Grand Farmer or Holy Farmer. The next student was called. He entered the transmutation circle, and he awakened the livelihood profession chef. The student was happy with his profession because his father was also a chef, and now he could follow in his footsteps. The names of students were called, but so far all of them only awakened livelihood professions. Master Zhang is hoping to see a high-level profession from the combat class, and even though Principal Lu Yun was hoping for the same thing, he knew it wouldn't be likely. The next student, Zia Zhu, was called, and as she approached the transmutation circle, she was determined to prove to Lin who the real genius is. You see, she is competing with Lin since they are the Academy's 2 geniuses, but he was always ahead of her when it came to grades. Master Zhang could tell at first glance that Zia had potential, and as she walked past them, he told the principal that her mental strength is double that of a normal person, and could awaken the mage profession. Soon after Zia stepped into the transmutation circle, a vision appeared, meaning that she was bound to awaken a rare profession. She awakened the combat class elemental mage, a rare profession. Principal Lu and Master Zhang were happy that they witnessed the awakening of a rare profession. And after Zia returned, a group of girls complimented her for awakening a rare profession. Lin heard his name, and he approached the transmutation circle. As Lin approached, Principal Lu turned to Master Zhang, and he asked him what he thought about Lin. Much to Principal Lu's surprise, Master Zhang didn't think anything was special about Lin other than the fact that he was calm. Master Zhang also reminded him that just because a student got good grades doesn't mean they would awaken a high-class profession. Lu understood, but he was still hopeful for another high-class profession awakening. The transmutation circle activated, and the beautiful day suddenly darkened. Chilling winds blew and dark clouds were formed. Principal Lu, astonished by what he was seeing, asked what was happening, and Master Zhang said it was another vision. Lu was surprised since a vision of this scale was unheard of, so he started to wonder if it would be a rare combat profession or a rare support profession. Lin's vision was much bigger than Zia, but she still didn't want to admit defeat. Suddenly, a student pointed out that there was movement within the dark clouds. Everyone looked up, and within the dark clouds there were hundreds of skeletons. The students were scared after seeing the skeletons, and one of them fell to the ground. All of the skeletons suddenly came down upon Lin in a flash of light. And even though Zia knew it was a vision, she also knew that in a fight she would easily be defeated. Lin absorbed all of the skeleton warriors and awakened the combat class necromancer, a unique hidden profession. Lin had awakened a unique hidden class, which meant that he was the only one in the world with the Necromancer class. Unless he died, no one else in the world could awaken the Necromancer class, and hidden classes were rarer than even legendary classes. Among his classmates there were those who were happy for him, those who were hateful, and those who wanted to see his profession in action. However, Lin paid them no mind, as awakening a unique hidden class was much better than he expected. And as he walked away, Master Zhang asked him to give him a moment of his time. Lin turned around and bowed his head to show Master Zhang respect. This was the first time Master Zhang had seen a unique hidden class profession, so he wanted Lin to give him a demonstration. Lin agreed to give a demonstration, and after checking his stats he saw that he had 2 skills. The first was Summon Skeleton Warrior, with levels ranging from Black Iron, Bronze, Silver, Gold, Diamond, Legendary, and Divine. The other skill was Soul Blaze, which burned the target's soul. The activation of both of the skills depended on his spirit stat, and Lin used 10 spirit to summon a skeleton warrior. After activating the skill, a Black Iron rank skeleton warrior was summoned. Seeing one of the skeletons that appeared in the sky, now in front of them, scared the other students. Master Zhang attacked the skeleton warrior with a beam from his fingertips. Suddenly, the skeleton warrior's eyes started glowing red, and Lin was asked if he wanted to counter Master Zhang's attack. Lin ordered his skeleton to not attack, and Master Zhang was impressed that the skeleton was unfazed by his attack. Furthermore, he was a level 52 professional, yet Lin's skeleton showed him hostility. He starts wondering if Lin's summons would get stronger as Lin leveled up. He thanked Lin for his demonstration and told him he couldn't wait to see him in the future. As Lin walked away, he ran into Gao Yang, who asked to touch the skeleton warrior. Lin allowed him to touch the skeleton, but he wondered how strong it would be. Lin told him that the skeleton was stronger than him, but Gao found it hard to believe. The next student to be called was Gao Yang, so he hurried to the transmutation circle, and Lin recalled the skeleton warrior. The system displayed that he used up one of his summoning spaces and had 9 left. The summon space served as a place to keep his skeletons until he needs them again, and the number of skeletons he could store will increase as he leveled up. Then Lin recalled the vision he had during his profession awakening of the previous owner of the Necromancer profession. This made him wonder if he would be able to kill dragons in seconds like he saw in the vision. His daydreaming was interrupted by Gao, who proudly told Lin that he awakened the combat class Sword and Shield Knight, an advanced profession. He is proud since now he could become Lin's sword and shield. Gao was the last student to get a profession, and with this the profession awakening was over. And Principal Lu told the students that they should be proud no matter what profession they awakened, and that the next day the novice leveling dungeon of Zihai would be open, so he hoped the students would continue to work hard. The monsters inside the novice dungeon were concentrated between level 1 and 8. Furthermore, the number of monsters was few, so it's safer than hunting in the wilderness. Zia called out to Lin and Gao, who were leaving, and after catching up to them, she told Lin that she wanted to compete with him during the exams. Lin didn't respond, and as he walked past her, she told him that she wouldn't keep losing to him. Even though she lost to him today, in her heart she was determined not to lose again. Lin returned home. The house was empty, and he picked up a photo frame. The photo was of him, his grandmother, and his sister. While speaking to the photo, he told his grandmother about the profession he awakened, and asked his sister to wait for him since he would be admitted to Zia Jing Academy. His moment is interrupted by knocking on the door. He opened the door to see Principal Lu, who handed him some supplies. Lin's sister Lin Mohan was the only one to be admitted to Zia Jing Academy last year, and Principal Lu had made a promise to her to look after Lin, and he had made sure to keep his promise. After giving the supplies to Lin, Principal Lu told him to get a good night's rest since he would be taking a test tomorrow, and afterwards he left. Later that night at midnight, something happened to the system while he was experimenting. The system detected that Lin had awakened as a necromancer, and it initiated a binding process to the strongest talent system. After the binding process was complete, the system congratulated Lin and rewarded him with the passive skill damage transfer, and also increased his comprehensive ability. The passive skill multiplied all skill effects by 5 and transferred any damage he received to one of his skeleton warriors. Lin was in disbelief since both of the skills sounded godlike. He summoned another Black Iron rank skeleton warrior, and all of the skeleton's attributes had increased by 5. This paired with the damage transfer ability would make him invincible. The next day arrived, and at the novice leveling dungeon, Gao asked Lin if he wanted to team up. Lin refused his offer since it would be faster for him to level up if he went solo. Irritated by this, Gao asked him if he was looking down on him. Suddenly Zia appeared out of nowhere, agreeing with Lin that it would be faster to level up if someone entered solo, and according to some seniors it's best to go in solo until you reach level 10, and afterwards it's better to team up. Then Principal Lu told the students that only Zia and Lin are permitted to enter the dungeon alone. The others will have support. A student asked why only Zia and Lin were permitted to enter the dungeon, and Principal Lu told them that Zia needed to level up fast since she was aiming for Zia Jing Academy, and Lin's abilities are unknown, so it's up to him if he wants support. All the students with a support profession were afraid of Lin's skeleton warriors. However, this wasn't a problem for him since he was aiming for Zia Jing Academy as well, so he needed to enter solo to level up quickly. Principal Lu protested this idea since going to Zia Jing Academy would be difficult. One needs to be over level 15 to be on the safe side for the academy test. And Lin's sister was only accepted in because she was level 16. Continuing on, he tells Lin that it would be difficult to get past level 15 in a week's time since the monsters in the novice dungeon only went up to level 8. However, Lin was confident that he could do it, and Principal Lu gave in, and hoped he could achieve his goals with his hidden profession. Zia approached the entrance of the dungeon, and before entering she reminded Lin of their bet, and before he could answer she told him that his silence meant he agreed to compete with her. Lin rubbed his head, disturbed at how competitive Zia was, and after she entered the dungeon, he followed behind her. Inside the dungeon, Lin used the 40 spirit he recovered by meditating last night. And since one skeleton warrior costed 10 spirit, he was able to summon 4. And after summoning them, he ordered them to find and defeat monsters. The skeletons went in different directions and quickly found and killed big ear rabbits. He was so proficient in leveling up that it only took him 30 minutes to reach level 2. Because he leveled up, all of his spirit was replenished, so he summoned 2 more skeleton soldiers to join the hunt. The new level 2 skeleton soldiers dashed off, and as the notification kept coming in, Lin unlocked a map. He noticed that his skeleton warriors missed a monster, however this gave him a good opportunity to try out his Soul Blaze skill. He instantly killed the level 2 gray cat, and soon afterwards he reached level 2. With his spirit replenished again, Lin summoned 3 more skeleton soldiers to join the hunt. With the new improvements to his army, level 5 and even level 6 monsters were easily killed. A student could stay inside the dungeon for 12 hours, and in just 4 hours Lin had reached level 4, and it's taking him less than an hour to level up. Outside the dungeon, Principal Lu and Zia's father were having a discussion. Principal Lu mentioned that Zia was very hard-working, and that she might be able to reach level 5 like her seniors Su Kaiyan Zing and Lin Mohan. The novice dungeon served as a test to see how fast the newbies could level up, and if Zia couldn't reach level 5 on the first day, it would be hard for her to enter Zia Jing Academy. Principal Lin is also wondering what level Lin would be able to reach with his unique profession. Everyone knows that once you step foot into the dungeon, you would be kicked out after 12 hours. Zia's father had also heard about Lin's awakening. Principal Lu told him that Lin had awakened the necromancer profession, but no one knew how powerful it was, so the two were waiting to see what level the student would be after the 12 hours. Inside the dungeon, Lin's skeleton warriors could move 500 meters away from him, so he could stay in a safe area and farm experience points. Lin continued to level up rapidly in the dungeon, but after 7 hours had passed, he had yet to encounter a level 8 monster. He decided to leave the safe area, and after walking for a while he came across a forest. And as he was about to enter the forest, he got attacked by a tree branch. However, he was unharmed thanks to his passive skill that transferred all the damage he received to one of the skeleton warriors. The giant level 8 bullwhip tree stood ahead of him. The level 8 monster he was desperately searching for was now in front of him, and all Lin could do was wonder how much damage the tree could take from his skeletons. And with a thought, he ordered a skeleton warrior to attack the tree, but surprisingly the tree monster wasn't killed in one hit. The tree countered, so Lin ordered the other skeleton warriors to attack the tree, and after 4 hits the tree was defeated. Being able to kill level 8 monsters will greatly increase his leveling speed. And looking around, he saw that the forest was filled with hundreds of trees, making it a leveling up sanctuary. Lin commanded the skeleton warriors to attack the bullwhip trees, and as the skeletons made their way through the forest, they proceeded to cut down the bullwhip trees. Outside the dungeon a portal appeared, but it hadn't been 12 hours yet, so everyone observing was wondering if there was trouble or if someone cleared the dungeon. Lin stepped out of the portal. After killing all the monsters inside, he had reached level 7. Principal Lu was in shock. However, Lin was disappointed that he couldn't reach level 8 even though he killed all of the monsters, so he wanted to go to Zai suburbia. Principal Lu was speechless and he didn't respond, so Lin called out to him. And after recovering from the shock, Principal Lu agreed to get Lin his traveling certificate and instructed him to rest. As Principal Lu made his way back to his seat, he was flooded with questions, wondering why Lin exited the dungeon so quickly. He sat down, grabbed his drink, and told them that Lin had killed every monster inside the novice dungeon. Everyone was stunned. Lin's profession was showing to be more powerful than legendary professions. Lin's future was looking bright, but Zia's father was concerned for his daughter since she was competing with Lin. Principal Lu told him not to worry since his daughter's spirit was never broken even though she never won against Lin. Lin meditated to replenish his spirit, and by now he had summoned a total of 24 skeleton warriors. But he still has 70 spots to fill. A while later the 12-hour time limit was up, and Zia came out of a portal. She was happy because she managed to reach level 5, and she looked around for Lin to see what level he reached. However, much to her surprise, Lin was already out of the dungeon waiting for the 12 hours time limit to end. He was also able to reach level 7. Her father called out to her, and after they got into the car, Ding Yong noticed that Zia was down, so he asked her if she needed help to surpass Lin. She refused, determined to surpass Lin with her own strength. However, this would prove to be difficult. Lin had already killed level 8 monsters, when she was barely able to kill one level 7 monster. On the way back from the novice dungeon, Gao grabbed onto Lin, begging him to form a party with him next time. Lin agreed and told him that he would be waiting at the school entrance. However, the next day Lin was nowhere to be found, and Principal Lu had to tell Gao that Lin went to Zia High Suburbia. Gao shouted at the top of his lungs, demanding to battle Lin the next time they meet, and he is advised otherwise because he stood no chance. At the Shenzia Empire Exchange, Lin went through the identification process, and he was granted a level 1 access to the Shenzia Empire Exchange. Lin looked through the mission available at the exchange, and came across one paying 10,000 gold to raid a dungeon, and defeat the level 14 boss monster, Goblin King. Dungeons are divided into 3 categories: normal difficulty, nightmare difficulty, which is much more difficult than normal and requires a party to clear. And then there's the hell difficulty, that's so difficult that you need a party of hunters with rare and above professions to challenge it. So it was out of the question for Lin right now. Lin handed the exit permit to one of the guards. The guard confirmed Lin's identity. He was confused why a level 7 student was allowed to exit the city. But the exit permit was real. So the guard activated the exit permit and gave Lin a warning to run away if he encountered anything too dangerous. Lin exited the city gate, and instantly he could tell from the beasts growling that the outside world is different from the cities. Lin noticed a goblin behind him and summoned a skeleton warrior to kill the level 10 goblin. When being compared to his level 7 skeleton warrior, the level 10 goblin was too weak. Lin summoned all of his skeleton warriors to seek out and kill the rest of the goblins. And at the rate at which his skeletons were killing the goblins reaching level 15 before the exam shouldn't be a problem. However, his sister had reached level 16 before her exam, and he wondered how she did it. He recalled his sister and was more driven to pass the exams for Zia Jing Academy. After a while of hunting the goblins, Lin reached level 10 and his skills had also improved. He could now summon a bronze rank skeleton warrior. The bronze skeleton warrior stats had increased a lot, and it could also use a rage shot skill that did 200% damage and had a cooldown of 10 seconds. With the upgrades to his army, it wouldn't be hard for Lin to rule the area. But while looking around, he realized that he killed all of the nearby monsters. Suddenly, he noticed an arrow flying towards him. He noticed it too late, and he got hit. Luckily, the damage was transferred to one of the skeleton warriors. Lin came face to face with a figure dressed in black. He got a good look of her as she ran past him, and from the way she was dressed he could tell that she had the assassin profession. And after she disappeared, an archer and a mage appeared. They seemed to be looking for the assassin girl, but they were heading in the wrong direction. They stopped and asked Lin if he had seen the assassin girl. But instead of answering, Lin wanted them to apologize for shooting him with an arrow. The archer, looking at the ground, apologized to Lin, even though he was confused how Lin didn't take any damage. The mage's expression changed, and he asked Lin if he was the one who summoned the skeleton warrior. The skeleton warrior stepped in between them, and the mage was convinced that Lin was a bad guy since he was controlling the dead, and he raised his staff to attack. However, the archer stopped him, and the two walked away. As the archer and mage walked away, Lin noted that if they would have attacked him, then he would have had to kill them. Later that night, Lin's bronze rank skeleton warriors were easily wiping out the monsters in the area. However, after hitting level 10, the amount of experience he needed to level up increased by a lot, and to reach level 11 he would have to kill 5,000 goblins, which is an impossible task to get done in one night. And since it was nighttime, he couldn't head back to the city. He summoned 4 more bronze skeletons, and he continued to push further. Later in the night, Lin set up a campfire deep in the forest. Afterwards, he was deep in thought about his leveling speed. He still couldn't figure out how his sister was able to reach level 16. He recalled a memory of his sister returning from the Zehai Mines dungeon, injured, and he concluded that she must have formed a party and challenged the nightmare difficulty. With this, he was more determined to find out the truth, and he decided that he would investigate his theory in the morning. With the skeleton warriors on guard, Lin began to meditate. Later that night, the skeleton warriors noticed footsteps approaching, and then notified Lin. The footsteps got closer, and the assassin girl from earlier appeared in front of him asking for food. He took out a boiled potato he had stashed away and handed it to her. The girl pulled down her mask and quickly started devouring the potato. Lin noticed that she started choking, so he took out a bottle of water and handed it to her. She drank the bottle of water, and after thanking him she asked for his name. Lin didn't respond, so instead she suggested that they used analysis skill to trade information. Lin agreed and the both of them activated the skill. However, to Lin's surprise, the spell failed and he couldn't get any information about the girl. But the girl, on the other hand, was able to see his name and his profession. This was the first time she had seen the necromancer profession, but she recalled the skeleton that Lin had next to him the last time they ran into each other. Lin calmly looked at her as she blabbered on, and he asked a question, why? The girl was delighted that Lin was speaking to her, but again he looked at her and calmly asked her why. She realized that Lin wanted to know why his spell failed but hers didn't, so she pulled out a blocking badge, which she had stashed away in her shirt. Blocking badge blocked anyone 10 levels below you from seeing your information. The girl put the badge away and asked Lin to use the spell on her again. Lin activated the spell and this time it was a success. The girl's name was Ningyi, a level 19 shadow assassin. Suddenly their expressions changed and both of them turned to face a certain direction. It was the archer and mage from earlier, and this time they were joined by a knight. They were trying to secretly surround them, but Lin had already noticed their presence. As Ningyi was about to run away, the archer shot an arrow. She reacted in time and was able to dodge the arrow. The arrow exploded and red arrow icons appeared above Lin and Ningyi's head. These arrows were marking arrows, and they are specially made to counter those with the assassin profession. The mage from earlier appeared out of nowhere, and with the archer and the knight, Lin and Ningyi were surrounded. Ningyi lifted her knife in a defensive stance and attempted to explain that Lin had nothing to do with her, but they didn't believe her. The archer who was on the tree decided to kill both of them so no one could find out that they had the mid-rank skill scroll. Lin was a level 10, so Ningyi decided to try and hold them off while Lin runs away. However, Lin was concerned for her. She attempted to convince him that she could run away after he was safe. But Lin already knows that the mark above her head countered the invisibility skill the shadow assassin profession had. With a signal from the archer, the mage raised his staff, getting ready to take both their lives with his attack. The mage used the illumination skill, making the surroundings as bright as day. This skill increased the range of his other abilities, chased away darkness, and further countered the assassin's invincibility skill. Ningyi became tense, and the archer on the tree drew his bow ready to shoot. The knight stood with his shield, and the mage's staff was illuminating the area. They were surrounded with no escape. Lin called for one of his skeleton warriors. The mage, seeing the skeleton, showed disdain towards Lin and his skeletons. He angrily used the fireball spell, expecting that Lin would become a pile of ashes. Ningyi grabbed onto Lin's arm so they could run away, but her legs had been caught by spiritual strings. With the fireball skill heading for Lin, the archer used his triple shot skill and fired arrows at Ningyi. Trying to protect Lin, Ningyi pushed him, but instead she pushed him in the direction of the fireball. In an instant, two skeleton warriors appeared, one protecting Lin from the fireball by taking the hit, and the other blocking the archer's arrows. The knight tried to attack the skeleton by bashing it with his shield, but he was pushed back. The mage couldn't believe that a level 10 necromancer could summon a skeleton that could resist his level 20 fireball. And as the skeleton approached him, he begged it not to come closer. The knight and the archer were also stunned that their attack didn't have a single effect. Lin summoned more and more of his skeleton knights until the mage, the archer, and the knight were completely surrounded. Ningyi was also stunned. She had seen Lin's skeletons earlier today. The skeletons appeared worn out, yet they were still so strong. She questioned why the archer and the mage's attack did nothing to the skeletons summoned by a level 10. She turned to Lin, whose eyes were filled with murderous intent, and without a thought all of the skeleton warriors attacked. As the skeleton warriors charged at him, the mage activated a barrier spell. But a single hit from a skeleton warrior was enough to leave cracks in the barrier, and soon after they broke through. In desperation, the mage activated a skill that pushed back the skeleton. He celebrated, thinking he succeeded in defeating the skeleton warriors, but this was short-lived. The skeleton warriors were quick to recover and they put an end to the mage in seconds. The archer, who was running away from a skeleton warrior, was puzzled. His agility was over 1,000, but he couldn't seem to put distance between him and the skeleton. He continued to use his agility to try and break free from the skeleton, but in the end he couldn't. The knight, seeing his two comrades dead, activated the extreme defensive skill and charged at the skeletons. With the extreme defensive skill, a knight is able to withstand an attack from a level 40 mage, and it proved difficult for the skeletons to break through. Seeing this, Lin commanded his skeleton warriors to activate their skill. Berserk Strike was activated. The knight couldn't believe that the skeleton warriors could use skills too, and he was running out of time. The extreme defensive skill lasted for 1 minute, but that time will decrease as the shield sustains damage. And with the skeleton warriors using their skill, the extreme defense skill went on to cool down. And as the knight was struck down, Lin recalled the words of his sister, telling him that if he was going to kill then he shouldn't hesitate. And that's exactly what he did. Ning Yi was still shocked. A level 10 had killed professionals, and he hadn't moved an inch. The skeleton warriors returned and dropped a bow, a staff, a shield, and a sword in front of their master. You see, when a person dies, the items that they had in their storage space will drop. All the items of the archer, the mage, and the knight were drops from the dungeon of Carmen's Orc Legion, a level 20 dungeon. Lin put all 4 of the equipment into his portable storage with the goal of selling them later, since they wouldn't be useful to him. After collecting the equipment, one item remained, a primary skill scroll, that gives you a skill below the level 20. Lin contemplated selling the scroll since it was worth 10,000 gold. But Ning Yi advises him to use the scroll. To her, 10,000 gold isn't a lot of money. Lin turned to her and asked how to use it. She laughed at him and said it's easy, just say use while holding it. Lin held the scroll tightly and said use, but nothing happened. Ning Yi then said that Lin didn't say it loud enough, you need to say it louder for it to work. But Lin had already noticed that the scroll only required spiritual energy to activate it. He injected his spiritual energy and the scroll was activated. Ning Yi was puzzled how Lin saw through her prank, and from the scroll Lin acquired the corpse explosion skill. The skill explodes corpses and deals 10% damage to enemies within 1 meter. To a necromancer, corpses also contain life, and even though the skill he acquired sounds weak, if he factors in his talent, then the radius would increase to 10 meters. And if he explodes a corpse, then it would set off a chain reaction of explosions. His talents made all of his skills overpowered. Curious, Ning Yi asked Lin if he learnt a new skill. Lin answered, and Ning Yi complimented his voice, wishing he talked more. Lin stared at her. Ning Yi was different from all the girls at school. Lin complimented her voice as well. Ning Yi blushed, and as a reward for him saving her and complimenting her as well, she gave him a small treasure chest. Lin took the chest and opened it. It was an intermediate skill scroll that would be worth 1 million gold. Lin was shocked. Not only was the item expensive, it was the reason why she was being chased. Ning Yi sat down by the campfire. She had obtained the intermediate skill scroll after opening a chest in Carmen's dungeon. But the archer and the mage were watching her. They wanted to snatch it away, and even though she didn't think the scroll was worth much, it was something that she found, so she didn't want to hand it over. The archer and the mage decided to take the scroll by force, so she ran. She ran for 2 days, going from Shanghai City to Zhai City, but she couldn't get away from them. Lin sat down next to Ning Yi and said, you almost died just now. Ning Yi explained that he shouldn't worry, since if she received fatal damage then she would automatically be teleported away. But she was still thankful that he saved her, since she still feared pain. Lin realized that he was worried for nothing, and that Ning Yi must be from a big family. Ning Yi reached out her hand and asked if he had more food to eat. Lin pulled out some more boiled potatoes. Ning Yi accepted the potatoes and started eating. She asked him what college he planned on attending, and Lin answered that he planned on going to Zhejiang University. To her, with Lin's skill he would be able to get into any university, and if he couldn't pass the exams no one could. She thought of something and told Lin that if he planned on going to Zhejiang Academy then he should head to Shangxia Tower. The first clear of the tower would give him double the rewards, so he should aim to clear as many floors as possible on his first try. Doing so would grant him a lot of points, and in Zhejiang University points are a form of currency. There is also a creation seminary, and he must also go there. Eventually Ning Yi fell asleep. Lin took off his coat and covered her with it. Then he started meditating to recover the spiritual energy he used to fight the archer, the mage, and the knight. The next day Ning Yi woke up hungry, and she asked Lin if he had more boiled potatoes. Lin gave her 7 boiled potatoes, but she reached out her hand demanding all the potatoes he had. But those were all the potatoes that Lin had. Ning Yi grabbed all the potatoes, then she stood up and told him that she would be going to level up. She wanted him to level up quickly as well, so the next time they meet they would be able to form a party and level up together. Ning Yi disappeared into the forest, and after she was gone, Lin approached the corpse of the archer, mage, and knight to test out his new skill. He activated the skill, and the corpses of the archer, mage, and knight exploded violently, leaving behind a giant crater. After the skill had been enhanced by his talent, the area of effect had increased a lot. It was now similar to a divine skill. Lin decided that he was at a point where he could comfortably try out the Zhai Mine dungeon. As he walked through the forest he was deep in thought. The spiritual energy required to summon the skeleton warriors was increased after they went from the black iron rank to bronze. And after meditating last night he could summon 4 more skeletons. And the total skeleton warriors he had was 48. But he still had room for 52 more skeleton warriors. However, there was no need for him to rush when the spots would be filled sooner or later. On the outskirts of the forest Lin could see the entrance to the Zhai mine. And later, after arriving at the mine, he walked to the portal with one of his skeleton warriors and drew the attention of all the hunters. In front of the portal Lin checked the dungeon information. The dungeon didn't have a hell difficulty, but elite monsters could still spawn in the other two difficulties, normal and nightmare. To clear the normal difficulty, a normal person would need a party of 5, with double supporters. A hunter approached Lin from the back trying to get a glimpse of his information. But Ningyi had given Lin her shield badge, so the hunter couldn't see his information, and the skeleton warrior glared at the hunter menacingly. 3 more hunters approached Lin trying to recruit him. Lin is happy that Ningyi gave him her shield badge since none of the hunters could see his stats. He declined the hunter's offer and selected the nightmare difficulty of the dungeon. A prompt popped up asking him to confirm that he selected the nightmare difficulty, and after thinking about it, Lin confirmed his selection. Lin is teleported away concerning the other hunters, who asked the hunter that previously tried to check Lin's information what level he was, and he told them that he couldn't see Lin's information. All the hunters could do was wait to see if Lin could come back alive. Inside the Zihai mining dungeon, Lin was observing a goblin inside a protective circle. The goblin was an enhanced elite monster and its stats were several times higher than a normal goblin. A level 14 knight would have about 300 to 400 into his stats, and he would be completely unmatched against the enhanced goblins. Normal profession would stand no chance of clearing the nightmare difficulty without a party. But when you compare the stats of Lin's skeleton warriors to the enhanced goblins, there was still a vast difference. Lin summoned his skeleton warriors and stepped out of the protective circle. The goblin noticed Lin and charged, but it was quickly slain by the skeleton warriors. Lin received 4,200 experience, which is 10 times higher than a monster of the same level in the normal difficulty. 1 kill in the nightmare difficulty is equal to 10 kills in the normal difficulty. Lin ordered the skeleton warriors to seek out and kill the monsters. He was determined not to leave a single monster alive. Soon after Lin leveled up, it took him only 5 minutes to level up, and leveling up also replenished his spiritual energy, and he summoned 4 more skeleton warriors. After passing level 10, the amount of stat points he received for leveling up also increased. His strength and agility stat used to increase by 10, but after hitting level 11 they went up by 20. His spiritual energy also increased by 100 now. The skeleton warriors also had 200 points added to all of their stats. However, he was confused since nothing changed about his corpse explosion skill. He recalled Ningyi, realizing that she might have an explanation. He gets surprised by the roar of the 15-level Wolf King. The monster's stats were higher than Lin's skeleton warriors, however there was only 1 Wolf King, and Lin had over 40 skeleton warriors. Lin ordered the skeletons to attack the monster. The Wolf King tried using the roar skill again to push the skeletons back, but they were able to endure its attack. Lin ordered his skeletons to use the Rage Strike skill. The Wolf King was struggling to attack the skeletons, and on the verge of being defeated it used the Roar skill again, and although it didn't have a lot of attack power it was able to push the skeleton warriors back this time. Afterwards the Wolf King ran away. Lin was puzzled. He didn't know that a dungeon boss would actually run away. But then he sensed that something was wrong, and he ordered the skeleton warriors to retreat. But it was too late and they were surrounded by level 14 mine wolves. The wolves weren't strong, but unlike the Wolf King there were hundreds of them. Lin knows that normal professionals wouldn't be able to handle so many wolves, but he was a necromancer, and to him all the wolves were experience points. His skeleton warriors attacked the wolves, and with the wolves' corpses he used his corpse explosion skill. The skill one-shotted all of the mine wolves, and afterwards the Wolf King returned, but it was easily defeated with the corpse explosion skill. The Wolf King gave him 15,000 experience, but when compared to the time it took him to kill it, it wouldn't be effective for leveling up, but luckily the monster dropped a valuable item. He stored the item away and continued to push further into the dungeon to find the final boss. In the future, Lin planned on soloing the hell difficulty of dungeons so he could get more experience. He leveled up 1 hour after entering the nightmare difficulty, so in a few more clears it's possible for him to reach level 19. Later he came across the final boss of the tower, the Goblin King, who was asleep. Lin was close to hitting level 12, so he woke the boss up, and instantly he was attacked. The damage was transferred to a skeleton warrior, but it sustained too much damage and it had to be shared with another skeleton warriors. But the skeleton warriors died afterwards, decreasing his total number of skeleton warriors to 54. Lin realized that when compared to the boss, his stats were too low. And even though the skeleton warrior's defensive stat was high, his was low when compared to the Goblin King, so he sustained more damage from the Goblin King. Lin's only weakness was himself. To change that he would have to focus on his stat points in the future. The skeleton warriors were struggling against the Goblin King, but this wouldn't be a problem for long since he has a whole army of them. The skeleton warriors succeeded in swarming the boss, but the Goblin King was able to use the shockwave skill and it jumped into the air and landed on the ground. The monster's skill was more effective at repelling the skeleton warriors than the Wolf King's roar skill. Following his previous attack, the Goblin King used the fire breath skill. Lin's skeleton warriors were engulfed in the flame, and he had no choice but to command them to return to the summoning space. The Goblin King's fire breath skill was causing trouble and he needed a way to interrupt it. The boss monster activated the skill again, and Lin summoned more skeletons to distract it, and used the Soul Flame skill. Lin succeeded in interrupting the boss monster's skill, but he was running low on spirit energy, so he summoned the rest of the skeleton warriors from the summoning space. The skeleton warriors continued to attack the Goblin King until it was defeated. As a reward, Lin received 40,000 experience points, the bronze level Goblin Sword, bronze level Wisdom Robe, and the Goblin King's core. Lin also reached level 12. Lin observed his rewards. The Robe of Wisdom shortened the cooldown of his skills by 5%. The cooldown wasn't much use to Lin, but the robe increased his spirit stat and health stat by 10. Other than the dagger and the Wisdom Robe, Lin also received the Goblin King's core, a valuable item that cost about 30,000 gold. At the moment, the core and the dagger were of no use to him, so he stored them away. And because his spirit energy was replenished, he summoned 4 more skeleton warriors before leaving the dungeon. Lin appeared at the entrance of the dungeon and caught the attention of all the hunters. They were surprised that he was able to solo clear the dungeon, and he was wearing the Wisdom Robe. Lin walked through the crowd too deep and thought to pay attention to the other hunters. The dungeon had a 12-hour cooldown, but hunting monsters outside the dungeon wasn't effective, so he decided to wait for the 12-hour cooldown. From the dungeon, Lin figured out his biggest weakness and how his skills worked. If he could use his corpse explosion skill properly, then it would become an overpowered skill. And his Soul Flame skill can interrupt an enemy's skill and ignores their defense. Lin went back to meditating, and 12 hours later the cooldown for the dungeon was up, and he could summon 4 more skeleton warriors. As he made his way to the entrance of the dungeon, he noticed a party of hunters gathered around a campfire. Seeing the party around the campfire made him recall Ning Yi. Lin made his way to the entrance and noticed that it was crowded with people. A guild called the Dynasty Guild, and the other hunters were in a standoff. The Dynasty Guild stood at the entrance, stopping anyone from challenging the dungeon. The hunters complained, and a mage from the Dynasty Guild affirmed again that no one could challenge the dungeon until their leader completed his task. But the hunters continued to protest. The mage activated his fireball skill, killing one of the protesters. The other hunters panicked and asked how he could just kill someone like that. The mage taunted the crowd, saying if they had the guts then they could try taking revenge on the Dynasty Guild. Lin approached one of the hunters and asked what was going on. The hunter recognized him as the person who cleared the nightmare difficulty of the dungeon by himself, and he explained that the Dynasty Guild was after the Goblin King core drop. But the drop rate is very low. However, it is guaranteed to drop in the nightmare difficulty once every 100 days. Today was the 100th day, and the Dynasty Guild leader went inside the dungeon, and he ordered his members to keep the others from entering. The Dynasty Guild had made a mission for hunters to get the Goblin King's core, but no one was able to complete it, and they were paying way less than the core was worth. Lin wondered if it was a coincidence that the Goblin King's core dropped for him. He turned to the hunter and asked him what the core was used for. The hunter explained that the core can be used to make a ring that increases all stats by 10 and increases all skill levels by 1. But it required the hunter to be level 15 to use it. To a beginner, the ring would seem like an overpowered accessory. Rumors had it that the guild leader of the Dynasty Guild was aiming for Xia Jing Academy, and is the reason he wanted the core so badly. They had everything else they needed to make the ring, but the Goblin King's core was still missing. Lin walked towards the portal to enter the dungeon. He didn't care about the Dynasty Guild's mission. They were just getting in his way of leveling up. The hunter tried to stop him, but with his skeleton warrior, Lin proceeded to approach the entrance portal. Noticing that Lin was approaching, the mage stepped on the body of the hunter he killed, and asked Lin if he was looking to die, just like the hunter below his feet. Lin stared at them coldly, ordering them to get lost. All of the members of the Dynasty Guild were well armored, and a kid dared to challenge them. The mage kicked the dead body of the hunter he killed away, and he asked Lin if he knew who he was talking to. Again, Lin glared at them coldly and told them to get lost. The mage used the detection spell and saw that Lin was a level 12 necromancer. He laughed at the fact that a level 12 dared to order the Dynasty Guild around. The other hunters tried to pull Lin back, but he was paying them no mind. Again, Lin glared at the mage coldly, and his gaze made the mage nervous. Lin started walking towards them, and the mage lifted up his staff and dared Lin to take another step. Lin continued to approach them, so the mage ordered the Dynasty Guild members to kill Lin. Lin ordered his skeleton warrior to attack, and the mage quickly activated a shield. In one strike, the skeleton warrior almost broke the shield. The mage was stunned. His shield should be able to withstand 5 attacks from level 20 hunters like him, but after just one hit from the skeleton warrior, his shield was almost broken. Lin ordered the skeleton warrior to use the Rage Strike skill. The mage was scared for his life. He never would have guessed that the skeleton warrior could use skills too, and if the next attack lands he would die for sure. So he activated the fire repulsion ring skill and pushed the skeleton warrior back. Afterwards the mage ordered the other members to attack. A knight used the shield bash attack on the skeleton warrior, but he was sent flying with one swing of the skeleton warrior's sword. The skeleton jumped at the mage following Lin's command. The mage quickly instructed the other members to kill Lin. The best way to kill a summons is to kill the summoner instead of his summons. Two archers activate the triple shot skill and fire it at Lin. The other hunters called out for Lin to dodge, but he didn't bother. Instead he summoned two more skeletons from the summon space. The two skeletons easily blocked the arrows, shocking the hunters. The mage managed to repel the skeleton warrior that was charging at him. He shouted, and immediately all of the knight rushed in front of him, shielding him from any incoming attacks. With no immediate danger, the mage started to cast a spell. He lifted his staff in the air and activated the Fire Serpent Dance skill. This is a rare skill that only 1 in 3 mages are able to learn. It is the strongest skill for mages that are level 20. The skill was directed at Lin and his skeletons. The skeletons were engulfed in the flame. However, in the midst of the flames, the skeleton warriors charged at the Dynasty Guild's members. The mage's face turned pale. He was already surprised by the 3 skeleton warriors earlier, and he never expected that Lin could summon more, to the point where they exceeded their numbers. The mage snapped out of it and ordered the members to get into formation. Then he lifted his staff and granted them a strength boost, speed boost, agility boost, and spirit boost. He also ordered the other members with a support profession to give the other members more spells to enhance their stats. The Dynasty Guild members are experienced in working together, and their formation proved that. Lin turned back to the hunters and asked them to step back. Afterwards he activated his Soul Flame skill and aimed for one of the archers in the middle of the formation. The skill landed successfully, and instantly the healers of the Dynasty Guild did their best to heal the archer. But after casting countless heal spells on the archer, he still died. The mage, witnessing this, started questioning if the whole Dynasty Guild was really about to be wiped out by one man. Lin ordered the skeleton warriors to group up and attack. The tanks on the front line of the Dynasty Guild formation activated the shield skill, but the skill couldn't last long. The supporters casted one buff spell after the other, but still the skeletons were able to break through. Lin used the Soul Flame skill once again, and as the tank burnt, the skeleton warriors finished him off. When the tank fell, an opening was created in the Dynasty Guild's formation, and the skeleton warriors made their way through, killing all the members. All the mage could do was watch as the killing ensued. He wanted to order them to run, but it was too late. A skeleton warrior lifted the dead body of the tank in the air and threw it in the middle of the formation. Then Lin used the corpse explosion skill and the tank's corpse detonated, causing a violent explosion. All that was left after the explosion was the corpse of the Dynasty Guild members. Lin walked through the corpse, and at the portal entrance he activated the corpse explosion skill again. After he entered the dungeon, the other hunters were in shock. Lin had killed all the members of the Dynasty Guild, and nothing was left behind, not even the corpses. They became scared that the guild leader would exit the dungeon and blame them for the guild members' death. They all agreed to leave the area and go somewhere where no one could find them. Half an hour later, the boss of the Dynasty Guild was teleported out of the dungeon after failing to get the Goblin King's core. A woman beside him noticed that there wasn't a single person nearby. The guild leader ordered the woman to send a message to see if their guild members were close by, but there was no response. The guild leader started to panic. The mage should be the strongest hunter in the area, and if he was killed, why is there no trace? Things may get dangerous if they stayed longer, so they left. 1 hour later, inside the dungeon, Lin killed the Goblin King for the second time. He received 40,000 experience points, a bronze rank weapon, Goblin King's magic book, and a low-level monster core. He didn't receive the Goblin King's core like the first time, but a monster core was still a good drop. Lin wanted to try the Goblin King's ring, but he didn't know any alchemist to craft it for him, so he decided to wait until he got into the Xiajing Academy. Lin sat on the dead Goblin King's corpse and opened the Goblin King's magic book. The book granted him 10 points to spirit, 10 to defense, and 3% magic attack power. It would be useful for Lin's Soul Flame skill and corpse explosion, but it did nothing for his skeleton warriors. In the process of killing the Goblin King, Lin reached level 13. He quickly calculated that if he wanted to reach level 15, then he would need to complete the dungeon 3 more times. He was running out of time, and at most he could do 5 more dungeons and reach level 16. He wanted to level up a bit more, but level 16 should be enough for him to get into Xiajing Academy. He teleported out of the dungeon, and outside he noticed that everyone was gone. But he expected this. The dungeon was on cooldown, so he decided to come back the next day. The next day we see Xia, who had finally reached level 10. and could challenge the high mine dungeon. She was proud of herself, but this quickly changed after she noticed Lin entering the dungeon alone. She couldn't believe that Lin had leveled up to the point where he could solo the dungeon. However, she was more determined than ever to not lose to Lin. And she also had a rare profession, so it shouldn't be hard for her to find a party. 45 minutes later, Lin arrived in the final boss room. After leveling up and meditating, Lin had summoned a total of 72 skeleton warriors. The Goblin King woke up, but by the time it stood, Lin had already defeated it. After defeating the Goblin King, Lin gained 40,000 experience. The loot was the same except for the bronze rank bow. The Goblin King seemed frustrated, and Lin waved his hand indicating that the monster shouldn't be surprised that it was killed, since monsters are meant to be killed. He didn't want to kill the Goblin King, but there was no other way. He needed to level up. Another 12 hours passed and Lin returned to his friend. They were quite acquainted already, so the Goblin King shouldn't be surprised to see Lin 3 more times. Lin quickly killed the Goblin King and reached level 14, and obtained the Goblin King's scepter that increased his spirit by 10, defense by 10, and magic power by 3%. After reaching level 14, the number of skeletons he had in the summon space was now 76, but he still hasn't found a way to increase the level of the skeleton warrior's skill. And while meditating outside the dungeon, Xia called out to him. She looked like she just came out of the dungeon. She stared at Lin and asked him what level he was. Lin told her that he was level 14. She was shocked. Her party had used up all of their energy and she was barely able to reach level 11. She couldn't believe it. During the novice dungeon there was only a 2-level difference between them, but that difference seems to be growing. She walked away to find another party. Xia entered the dungeon again. Lin couldn't believe it. Dungeons had cooldowns, but Xia was challenging a dungeon again after just coming out. 1 hour later she came out of the dungeon exhausted. But after seeing Lin, she motivated herself to find another party. 1 hour later she came out of the dungeon looking worse than before. Lin wanted to ask her about the dungeon cooldown, but Xia quickly accepted a request for party members. Half an hour later, she exited the dungeon. She looked beyond exhausted, but she reached level 12, and was closing the gap between her and Lin. She sat down next to Lin, and Lin looked down at her and asked her if she wasn't tired. She replied saying that she was, but after being overshadowed by Lin for so many years, her being exhausted wasn't going to stand in her way of surpassing him. Surpassing Lin wasn't her only goal. She also wanted to enter Xia Jing Academy. Lin was trying to help her out, so he told her that if she challenged the nightmare difficulty then she would level up faster. But this was out of the question for her. Challenging the nightmare difficulty required an elite party. But elite parties only allowed level 16 and 17 professionals to join them. Lin looked at her and was finally able to ask how she managed to ignore the dungeon cooldown. Xia couldn't believe it. How could Lin have leveled up so fast when he didn't know how to bypass the dungeon cooldown? However, this was a good opportunity for her to tease Lin. She turned to him and said, "If you say please, I'll tell you." Lin was now faced with a decision: sacrifice his pride and learn how to bypass the dungeon cooldown, or remain prideful and fail to hit level 16. His pride won and he remained silent. Xia was disappointed. She had hoped that Lin would beg her, but he didn't. She pulled out an item from her pocket and handed it to him. The beginner level cooldown talisman can reduce the cooldown of dungeons. However, since the rank was low, it would be ineffective on dungeons above level 20. Lin was stunned. He couldn't believe that an item like this existed. He turned to Xia and asked if the item was expensive. She informed him that her father paid a high sum to purchase it. Lin looked disappointed. He planned on asking her to borrow it, but it looks like he wouldn't be able to. Continuing on, Xia started complaining out loud. She had to clear 9 normal level dungeons to hit level 15, and with the beginner level talisman it was possible. But she would need to hit level 15 in 2 days, and after just a few hours she was already exhausted. Lin listened in and calmly thought about his options. He could party with her and share the beginner level talisman, or he could struggle to hit level 16. Lin looked at her and said, "I can party with you, that way you will definitely reach level 15, and you wouldn't have to do anything." Xia looked at Lin. She had completely forgotten that Lin could solo clear dungeons, and if she joined his party there would be more experience. But if she joined his party then she would never be able to reach a higher level than him. However, at the pace her leveling was going she could never catch up to him, so she took him up on his offer. Lin informed her that they will be starting in 2 hours, so she should rest, and while she rested Lin meditated. 2 hours later Lin woke Xia up, and they made their way to the dungeon entrance. At the portal Lin used the beginner level talisman, and selected the nightmare difficulty. Inside the dungeon, Xia started freaking out after seeing the monster's stats. She asked Lin if he chose the wrong difficulty by accident. Lin stepped out of the protective barrier and told her to stick close to him. She carefully made her way out of the protective barrier, looking around for any monsters. She was slowing him down, so Lin turned around and asked her if she was scared. She shouted no way and ran to catch up to him. With Xia by his side, Lin summoned more skeleton warriors from the summon space and ordered them to attack. The skeleton warriors' stats were so high that the level 14 goblins were doing no damage to them. They quickly made their way past the goblins and entered the Wolf King's den. Zia was horrified as she stared at the giant Wolf King. The one in the nightmare difficulty was twice the size of the Wolf King in the normal difficulty. Lin had brought a goblin's corpse with him. He threw the corpse in the air and activated the skill corpse explosion. It would be a waste of time to fight the Wolf King when he could kill it in one hit. Zia watched the explosions in shock. Her experience bar instantly filled up 30%, and Lin just killed the Wolf King in less than a minute, when her and her previous party suffered for 20 minutes. Lin looked back, signaling for them to keep moving. Zia followed behind him, but she was still in shock. A student below level 20 is solo clearing a nightmare difficulty dungeon, so she asked him if he had been soloing dungeons since he was level 10. Lin replied yes. Then 10 minutes later they arrived at the boss room. Zia still couldn't wrap her mind around what she was witnessing. Her previous party took over an hour to enter the boss room, but Lin did it in just 10. Lin wasn't done with the surprises. He threw a goblin corpse he carried with him and used corpse explosion, killing the Goblin King in one hit. After defeating the Goblin King, Lin reached level 15. The gap between him and Zia continued to grow. Zia received 25,000 experience points, the bronze level Goblin King's longsword, and a low-level monster's core. Zia was disappointed with her rewards. She wanted the Goblin King's scepter. Suddenly Lin called out to her asking if she wanted the Goblin King's scepter. She replied saying that it was an item she was hunting for, and although there were some in the trade market, she didn't want to ask her father to buy it for her. Lin threw the Goblin King's scepter to her and told her to have it. She accepted it gratefully, but she questioned why Lin wasn't going to use the scepter himself. Lin pulled out the Goblin King's magic book from his storage and informed her that he likes using the book more than the scepter. Lin approached the Goblin King's corpse as he expected. Gathering the monsters together and using corpse explosions was the fastest way to clear dungeon. He knelt down and spoke to the corpse. Sorry, but you will have to die 5 more times. Zia asked him why he was talking to the boss, and Lin told her it was his ritual he performed after clearing the dungeon. Zia found it strange that Lin was speaking to the boss's corpse, but she also thought it was a bit cute. Another one had fallen under Lin's spell. The both of them exited the dungeon, and after making it outside, Lin quickly activated the beginner level talisman, and they entered the dungeon again. They easily cleared the dungeon for the second time and went back to clear it 3 more times. After their 5th run, the beginner level talisman used up all of its durability. However, this wasn't a concern for Zia. She reached level 14 and they still had half a day left before the big exam, meaning they could clear the dungeon 2 more times and she could reach level 15. She asked Lin if he was close to reaching level 16. Lin informed her that he was, and she asked him if he was planning to try and become a champion. She informed him that if he became a champion he would receive a lot of points and would get a chance to enter the Creation Seminary. Lin asked her what the Creation Seminary was, and she told him that the Creation Seminary was a gathering of the best students in the country, and Zahai City only had 1 student inside the Creation Seminary. Zia thought that Lin had a high chance to become the second Zahai City student to enter the Creation Seminary. Lin started thinking. His sister was at Zia Jing Academy, and getting admitted is his goal, so if the chance to become the champion arises then he would aim for it. Behind Lin, Zia noticed Gao Yang trying to join a party. He was now level 11, but because he was a knight he was rejected. Lin started approaching him so he could invite him to join his party. Then inside an office the boss of the Dynasty Guild was screaming at his son for restricting a dungeon. He took a deep breath and told his son to stay in the guild until it was time for the exams, since he was already level 16. The son asked what his father planned on doing about the guild members that disappeared. He told his son not to worry about it since he already hired people to investigate the members' disappearance. Back at the dungeon entrance, Lin and Zia called out to Gao. He turned around and saw the 2 enemies walking closely with each other. He teased them saying, "You two have gotten very close. What developments did I miss?" Zia told him to shut up or she would rip him apart. Then she told him to join their party once their cooldown ended. She was confident that they could help him reach level 12. Gao was grateful. His goal was reaching level 12. He continued to tease Zia, then he asked her how long until the dungeon resets for them. She told him that they had 10 hours left. Gao decided to go hunt monsters and give his friend some room to continue working his magic. Suddenly he heard someone casting a spell, and when he turned around Zia had activated the fireball skill. He quickly ran away. 10 hours later the 3 returned to the portal, and after adding Gao to the party they entered the dungeon. Inside the dungeon, Gao noticed that the stats of the goblins were very high. He asked Lin and Zia if they accidentally picked the nightmare difficulty. Zia told him to be quiet and follow along. She exited the protective barrier, and Gao followed closely behind her. In just a few minutes they made their way to the boss room, and Lin one-shot the Goblin King. Gao was speechless. The final boss of the dungeon that even a party of 10 would find hard to defeat was just killed in one hit. He grabbed Lin by the leg and begged him to take him along anytime he entered a dungeon. Zia told him to act like a knight, however Gao didn't think he should, when Lin could just carry him. Gao continued to hold on to Lin's leg, making him uncomfortable. Lin asked him to let go of his leg and promised to bring him along in the future. The next day on the city wall, Principal Lu and a few others waited, anticipating the students' return. One of the other principals asked Principal Lu if the two geniuses from his school were aiming to enter Jiajing Academy. Principal Lu replied, yes, both Lin and Zia are trying to get into Jiajing Academy. According to the previous year test results, only those at level 15 had a good chance of entering, and those at level 16 were almost guaranteed to enter. Principal Lu had his hopes up for a miracle. Lin's sister managed to reach level 16, and Zia was the pride of her family. The first student from the other school approached the city gate. He was a swordsman that was able to reach level 12. The next student was a level 13 archer. A while passed, but Gao, Lin, and Zia hadn't shown up yet. The other principals started bragging about their students, even though no one above level 14 had appeared yet. A little while later, Lin, Gao, and Zia appeared. Gao was able to reach level 12 thanks to Lin's help. Zia reached level 15, however this meant she only had an 80% chance of entering Jiajing Academy. Lin, on the other hand, was level 16. The principals were shocked not only by their level but by the equipment they were carrying. That evening, Principal Lu guided Lin, Gao, and Zia to the bus that would take them back to school after the other students arrived. He is happy that his students made the other principals eat their words. Inside the bus, Lin was deep in thought. He was able to reach level 16 and was confident that he could get into Jiajing Academy. He decided to aim for Creation Seminary. A while later, all the other students had arrived and the bus took them back to the school, where they would rest for the night. The next day, Lin arrived at the examination site. His spirit energy was fully recovered. He had 100 skeleton warriors in the summoning space, and he was in peak condition. Gao spotted Lin making his way through the crowd and called out to him. Zia heard Gao, and she quickly made her way to them. She asked Lin if he was confident in passing, and Lin responded with one word, yes. Since Lin was so confident, she asked him to promise her that they would meet in Jiajing Academy. Lin promised. Then all of the students were given a blue crystal. Principal Lu explained to them that if they infused spiritual energy into the crystal, then they would be transported to the examination site. The students all activated the crystal, and they were teleported away. Lin was the first to teleport to Jiangning Provincial Exam Center, and he counted the other students as they appeared. There were over 10,000 students in the exam center, and suddenly the trial tower was activated. After it was formed, the students heard a voice telling them to listen to the rule. No speaking was allowed, no questions were allowed, and if the students didn't follow the rule, they would fail automatically. Two students were confused. They turned to each other questioning what they just heard. Instantly, the two were disqualified and were teleported away. The voice continued. The trial tower will give you different trials based on your profession. Main battle types would be given a monster to defeat. Support professions will be put in various situations. After clearing the basic trial, students will be given an option to choose between 3 levels: normal, nightmare, and hell. The different levels would give the students different results and different amounts of points. The points would reflect their results, and they can be used in the academy. The point is the academy's version of gold. Finally, the student could only use the equipment they had equipped, but they couldn't use items in their storage space. Those who violated the rules would instantly be disqualified. The students got into a single file line, and after a while it was Lin and 2 other students' turn. As they were about to be teleported into the trial, professionals watched in anticipation of what the new necromancer profession could do in action. Inside the trial tower, Lin had to fight the wolf orc mage. The countdown started, and instantly after the timer reached 0, Lin used the Soul Blaze skill and killed the monster. The professionals looked at the results in disbelief. Lin killed the monster in 0.1 second. Inside the trial tower monitor room, the examiners were puzzled on how to judge Lin's abilities, because he killed the monster instantly. Ning Xuanfeng, one of the main examiners, walked into the room. He had heard about Lin's exploits and he wanted to see him in action. On a screen, a video of Lin killing the monster in one hit played. But it wasn't enough to satisfy Xuanfeng's curiosity, and he asked the examiners to increase the trial difficulty for Lin to legendary. One of the examiner was concerned, feeling that it would be unfair to Lin. Xuanfeng told the examiner that it was fine since Lin was able to one-shot the monster, and if Lin is able to defeat the legendary difficulty, then he himself would give him 1,000 points, on top of the 100 he is already going to receive. Inside the trial, Lin was prompted to enter the second exam and kill the wolf beastman mage. Lin accepted, and instantly after the countdown ended, he used Soul Blaze, ending the fight. It was another instant kill. The examiners were shocked. Lin's abilities were on the level of a legendary class. With this, Xuanfeng was satisfied with Lin's abilities, and he concluded that the first rounds of the exams wouldn't be enough to get a full gauge on Lin's power. He asked the examiners to move on to the second rounds of the exams. It was then announced to the students that the first round of the exams was over, and out of 10,632 people, only 5,220 of them passed. The results were posted. Lin was in first place, a girl named Zuomei was in second, Zia was third, and Wang Zihao, the son of the Dynasty Guild leader, was fourth. Zia looked over the rankings. She expected Lin to get first place. What she didn't expect was for him to clap the boss in 0.1 second. But she was still motivated to continue. However, Zihao on the other hand was furious. He couldn't believe that he didn't make it into the top 3. He was convinced that Lin cheated. It was then announced to the students that the second round of the trial was beginning, and that they could choose the difficulty. But a warning was given out to them explaining that the second trial was dangerous, so if it gets too dangerous the student could shout forfeit to end their exams. The second trial was structured like a dungeon, and the students could choose from normal difficulty, nightmare difficulty, and hell difficulty. From this, Lin concluded that the second trial would likely be a competition to see which student could kill the most monsters in 30 minutes. Zihao, a level 16 rage warrior, is excited to prove that he wasn't a crybaby and that he was stronger than Lin. Zia knew that her profession, elemental mage, wasn't suited for close combat or 1 versus 1 situation, but she should be able to kill a large group of enemies. Inside the trial tower monitoring room, the examiners pulled up the information of the top 4 students. Even though they all looked promising, the examiners couldn't help but focus their attention on Lin. Lin knew that for most students the second exam would be difficult, but for him it would be light work. He chose the hell difficulty and entered the second exam. Inside a room, the principals from the different schools gathered. They were all feeling envious of Principal Liu for having 2 students rank in the top 3. Inside the trial, a level 13 wolf beast man warrior spawned, and after looking at their stats, Lin became very disappointed that the monsters were so weak. However, he expected this since the examiners didn't want the students to die. He summoned 2 skeleton warriors and ordered them to attack. The skeleton warriors attacked the wolf beast man warrior, killing them the second they spawned in. It was too easy for Lin. Inside the trial tower monitoring room, the examiners were speechless. Lin's profession had completely surpassed their expectations. And while the other students were exerting their energy, Lin had a picnic while 2 of his skeleton warriors farmed the wolf beastman warriors. 25 minutes later, it was announced that the second exam was over, and over half of the 5,000 students forfeited. Zihao was exhausted after killing 50 wolf beastman warriors, and he was excited to check the rankings, expecting to be first place. But to his surprise, the rankings hadn't changed and he was still in 4th place. He couldn't believe it. A monster spawned every 5 seconds inside the trial tower, and the maximum points you can earn from the hell difficulty is 1,800 points. And Lin got 1,600 points, meaning he killed 300 monsters in 30 minutes. Outside the tower, Principal Liu was trying his best to calm the other principals down. However, they were too surprised by how strong Lin was. Inside the tower, Lin was prompted to choose a difficulty for a boss level monster, and like the chat he chose the hell difficulty. Lin was teleported to the boss room, and a level 15 wolf beastman captain was spawned. However, the monster's stat couldn't compare to the elite monsters in Zai mines, further disappointing Lin. He understood that the higher up wouldn't release a hell difficulty monster on students, but this was too much. He questioned if he was really that much stronger than the other students. Lin summoned his skeleton and ordered them to attack the boss. Inside the other trial, the students were struggling with the boss monster, and they activated their skill. However, Lin's skeleton one-shotted the boss with their rage shot skill. Inside the trial tower monitoring room, the examiners didn't know what to do. They felt like they hadn't seen Lin's real strength at all. One of them suggested that they wait for the 5th round of the exams to see Lin's full power. Lin opened the rankings, seeing that he had over twice the amount of points as the person in second, and that his friend Gao was also doing pretty good on the exams. Then it was announced that the 4th round of the exams was about to begin, and the difficulty had increased greatly, so the students were given a chance to forfeit. With their current points, getting into one of the top 100 academies wouldn't be a problem. But no one forfeited, and the rules were explained. On the 4th round of the exams, the students had to survive 10 waves of monster attacks. Each wave had 10 monsters, and the next wave would start even if the previous 10 monsters weren't defeated. The last wave of monsters would be led by a boss, and the students pass by killing all the monsters. Every monster is worth 10 points, and if they cleared all 10 waves they could get 2,000 points. Inside the trial tower monitoring room, Chu and Feng and some other examiners expected this round of the exams to be a challenge for Lin. However, the others were doubtful. The trial began, and Lin concluded that 3 skeletons warriors would be enough to finish the 4th round, and he summoned 1 more skeleton warrior from the summon space. This angered the examiners as they didn't expect Lin to be able to summon another skeleton warrior. Lin was bored, feeling that the exam was boring and less exciting than the Zai mines. Lin's bored expression angered the examiners even more, and they decided to observe the other students. Xia was using the skill Path of Fire, an AoE attack to clear the waves. Zhao was cutting through the monsters with his sword. In the waiting area, the students who failed the 4th test were watching Lin in amazement. Gao, who managed to make it to the 6th wave, took this opportunity to educate the other students of Lin's exploits. It was finally the last wave and only the top 5 students were left. Feng Zhu had been saving his power for the last 2 rounds of the tower because they gave the most points. Zihao entered his berserk state for the final wave, and Lin still had a bored expression, as his 3 skeleton warriors easily destroyed the final wave. With this, the 4th rounds of the exam came to an end, and the results were posted. Lin was 1st, Xuomei was 2nd, Xia was 3rd, Zihao was 4th, and Feng Zhu was 5th. They were the only students to pass the 4th rounds, and the failed students started wondering if someone could actually beat the 5th round. Zihao was exhausted from his skill, but he continued to act high and mighty. Xia took a deep breath, thinking that a top 5 ranking would be enough to get her into Xia Jing Academy. Mei's eyes were set on Xia Jing Academy. The examiners could see that some of the top 5 students were getting complacent, and he announced if they didn't take the 5th round seriously, then they would fail, and their chances of entering Xia Jing Academy would be 0. Continuing on, he explained the 5th round of the exams. The top 5 students will be teleported to a special place, the campaign space. The campaign space will spawn all sorts of monsters. The first wave would have over 100 monsters, and it contains boss level monsters. The faster they killed the monsters, the faster they would spawn. They warned the students to watch how fast they were killing the monsters, and explained that the campaign space had 5 different phases. Each phase had a different score, but only the examiners could see the different scores. After the students entered, the examiners would be monitoring their scores. The announcement ended, advising the students to use everything they were hiding. Inside the campaign space, Lin could feel the aura of death, and he concluded that the examiners did this to prepare the students for battle. He noticed some level 15 furry beast men and was disappointed that they had no skills, and their stats looked low. One of the furry beast men roared, calling the others to his location. One of Lin's skeleton warriors attacked the monster, but to Lin's surprise, the monster didn't die in 1 hit like the other monsters did. But 2 hits was enough. With the monster dead, Lin activated his corpse explosion skill, killing the others. Inside the trial tower monitoring room, the examiners were notified that Lin's points increased by 500. Inside the campaign, Lin wanted to wait for the other monsters to arrive, and use corpse explosion on the corpses of the monsters he killed. However, after 10 seconds the corpse started disappearing, so Lin changed up his plan. He summoned more skeletons from the summon space, and ordered them to spread out and attack the leftover monsters. And as the skeleton warriors drew the attention of the monsters, Lin used corpse explosions, wiping out the monsters in the area, and breaking the object the examiners were using to watch him. Inside the trial tower monitoring room, the examiners were panicking. They couldn't see what Lin was doing, but out of nowhere his points increased by 4,500. Meaning he already wiped out the first 100 monsters. Xu and Feng had many questions. What was Lin doing? What kind of broken plot armor type profession is necromancer, and what were Lin's limits? Back at the campaign space, Lin was wondering if he needed to wait for more monsters to spawn again. Suddenly he noticed a barrage of fireballs coming his way. He blocked the attack with his skeleton warriors, and he noticed some furry beastmen mages on a cliff who were using the fire rain skill. But instead of being worried, Lin looked excited for the first time during the exams. More monsters had spawned for him to play with, and since they already attacked him, it was his turn. Suddenly, countless furry beastmen warriors charged in. However, Lin was unfazed. He ordered his skeleton warriors to attack the furry beastmen. The skeleton warriors rushed in and clashed with the furry beastmen. Lin then used the corpse explosion skill on the corpses of the furry beastmen his skeleton warriors killed, annihilating the army of beastmen that were charging at him. Inside the trial tower monitoring room, the examiners were shocked to see that Lin's points had suddenly increased by another 6,000 points. They couldn't believe that Lin had cheats on top of his summons and soul flame skill. They started questioning if his profession surpassed legendary professions. Back inside the campaign, the smell of death had gotten stronger, and Lin questioned if the second wave was about to start. The second wave began, and suddenly Lin had been surrounded by beastman archers and beastman warriors. The level and number of the monsters had increased drastically. It would be very difficult for those with a different profession to beat wave 2 of the campaign. But Lin had nothing to worry about. Inside the trial monitoring room, the examiners were having a discussion. In the entire history of the Shangxia Empire, there had only been one student to get past Wave 3. However, it looked like Lin had a chance to be the second. The examiners believed that Lin had awakened his innate talent. This would be a blessing for mankind, and would mean that Lin could awaken another profession on his second awakening. At the waiting area, the leaderboard was updated. Lin was first with over 34,000 points. Xia was second with over 7,000 points, and Feng Zhu was third with over 6,000 points. The other students were shocked. Lin was already dealing with the second wave while the others were still in the first. They wished they had the authority, so they could send in boss monsters instead of giving him free points. At Xiajing, the capital city of the Shenzhia Empire, the true form of the Tower of Trials, one of the three great divine towers of the Shenzhia Empire, was suddenly attacked by a black beam. The tower was able to stop the beam and defeat the monster that attacked. However, before the monster died, it laughed, saying, "Kill me, I'm just a clone. However, those brats in the tower will die." Later, 3 hunters were observing the true form of the Tower of Trials. They didn't expect that the remnants of the Abyss would attack them so openly, and it was clear that their aim was the students taking their exams. One of the hunters is afraid that the tower would be in chaos since the remnants of the Abyss managed to enter the tower. However, he is told that there was nothing to fear since the tower draws its power from the Abyss. Bai Yuan, the top hunter in the Shenzhia Empire, asked the other hunters how long it would take to restore the tower, and they replied saying it would take an hour. Inside the campaign, all of the monsters suddenly disappeared, confusing Lin, and while looking around he gets noticed by Xia, who called out to him. She was confused. How was it possible for her to meet with the other examinees? The monsters that she was fighting had suddenly disappeared, and she asked Lin if he knew what was going on. Lin told her that he didn't know either, and suddenly Zihao and the other students appeared. A hologram of Bai Yuan appeared in the sky, and after greeting the students he introduced himself. Continuing on, he explained that a demon of the Abyss had infiltrated the campaign and was targeting them. He and the other hunters were doing their best to restore everything, but it could take up to an hour. So during that hour he wanted the students to do their best to protect themselves. He didn't know how the monster from the Abyss would attack them, but he believed that if they worked together they could survive for an hour. The hologram of Bai Yuan disappeared, and Zihao instantly took charge, chanting, "We shall not be afraid to die while fighting." Lin, on the other hand, was thinking, the weakest monster from the Abyss is at least level 70, and since Bai Yuan said they could win, that means the monster that infiltrated wasn't that strong. Inside the trial tower monitoring room, the examiners were panicking about what Bai Yuan had said. Ning Xuanfeng told the examiners not to panic and to believe in Bai Yuan. He also told them to relay Bai Yuan's message to the others outside. Back inside the campaign, the blood moon of the Abyss appeared, signaling that the forces of the Abyss are on the move. The students, following Zihao's orders, took a defensive formation as the forces of the Abyss began to gather. The level cap in the campaign is level 19, and a level 19 Beastman warrior that's been corrupted by the Abyss appeared. The students felt relieved that they only had to fight one level 19 monster. However, more of the Beastman warriors started to appear. Xia grabbed onto Lin's arm, asking him what they should do. There were a lot of monsters, so Lin knew it would be troublesome, but they should be able to deal with them. All the monsters are enhanced elite monsters that were on the same level as the enhanced monsters in the Nightmare level dungeon Lin was soloing. Since the monsters were enhanced by the Abyss, Lin was wondering if they would give him more experience. The army of beastmen approached the students slowly. The voice of the Abyss monster spoke, mocking what Bai Yuan had told the students earlier. Zihao and the other students trembled in fear. He knew that they couldn't win against the monsters, and he was unable to exert his strength due to the monster's aura. Lin started walking towards the army of beastmen as his skeleton warriors followed. Xia called out to him, asking why he was approaching the monsters. Lin turned back, telling her to take a step back, but she refused and followed closely behind him. Lin decided to ignore her since she wouldn't be able to get in his way, and continued approaching the monsters. The other students decided it would be best if they followed closely behind Lin as well. As Lin approached, the voice of the Abyss monster spoke, praising Lin for having the guts to step up to try and fight the beastmen. It asked Lin if he would abandon the students and join him in the Abyss. Lin remained silent. In his head he calculated that the distance between him and the monsters was 50 meters, which is the best distance to use his corpse explosion skill. Lin stopped approaching the beast man and summoned all 100 skeleton warriors from the summoned space and ordered them to attack. The skeleton warriors rushed in and used the rage shot skill on the beast man. However, much to Lin's surprise, the beast man didn't die. It seemed like the corrupted beast man had 3,000 points in strength and 3,500 into health. Lin smiled because the more health the monsters had, the more effective his corpse explosion skill would be. His skeleton warriors were finally able to kill one beastman warrior, and Lin got 8,000 experience. This made Lin happy, and even though there wasn't much experience, it would add up because of the amount of monsters. Lin activated the corpse explosion skill, wiping out all of the beastmen. The other students couldn't believe it. Lin had just wiped out an army of level 19 monsters just like that. Zihao fell to his knees. He couldn't understand why Lin was so powerful, and why he wasn't the one that awakened the necromancer profession. The Abyss monster was outraged, and it retracted its offer of having Lin join him in the Abyss. Now it wanted to devour Lin. It summoned more beastmen warriors to attack the students. Lin was able to locate the Abyss monster's location, and he ordered his skeleton warriors to protect the students from the new monsters that had spawned. Afterwards, he picked up a beastman's corpse and threw it at the Abyss monster, and used corpse explosion. The Abyss monster wasn't dead yet, so he used the soul flame skill. The Abyss monster couldn't believe it. His soul was being burnt through, but there is no way a profession like should exist. Back outside at the Tower of Trial's true form, Bai Yuan and two other hunters suddenly felt that the power and influence of the Abyss monster was weakening tremendously. Bai Yuan was filled with rage. He released his spiritual energy and asked if everyone in the tower was dead. One of the hunters informed him that he could still sense human auras inside the tower, and it seemed like the Abyss monster had been injured. Bai Yuan stopped releasing his spiritual energy. He was glad that the students were safe. But the Abyss monster was using the power of the Abyss, so how would level 15 and 16 students be able to injure it? Inside the Tower of Trials, the Abyss monster was in rage, and it buffed the stats of the Beastman warriors. Lin was in shock. His corpse explosion skill had leveled up, and the radius had increased to 20 meters, and the damage was now equal to 150% of the enemy's HP. He questioned if the corpse explosion skill is the only skill that would level up the more he used it, or if all skills learnt through a skill scroll would level up this way. Lin leveled up as well, and with the level 2 corpse explosion skill it was time to end the Abyss monster. The other students couldn't believe it. Lin was getting stronger even in their current situation, while the only thing they could do was be thankful that he was on their side. Lin ordered his skeleton warriors to throw the corpses of the Beastman into the sky, and after the corpses reached the monster he used the skill corpse explosion, destroying the Abyss monster. The sky slowly began to go back to normal. The students looked up to the sky questioning if they had survived the Abyss monster's attack. Outside at the Tower of Trial's true form, the Grandpa Hunter told Bai Yuan that the presence of the Abyss monster had disappeared, and the tower was in the process of recovering. Bai Yuan nervously asked the Grandpa Hunter how the kids were doing, and the Grandpa Hunter explained that the students were fine, and there wasn't a single casualty. Bai Yuan was stunned. This was totally different from what they were expecting to happen, and he wondered what had happened inside the tower. He asked the Grandpa Hunter to teleport the students out of the campaign mode, so they could investigate what had happened. Inside the campaign, Zia approached Lin asking him if he was okay. Lin answered saying he was fine. Suddenly, a hologram of Bai Yuan appeared in the sky again, explaining to the students that the power of the Abyss monster had disappeared, and that they would be teleported to the original examination site. Afterwards, the results would be announced. After the students were teleported to the original examination site, the voice of the tower spoke asking the students to wait for the results to be posted. Inside the tower trial monitoring room, Ning Xuan Feng was deep in thought. The main combat exam's results consisted of scores and evaluation. Being admitted to the top schools isn't just about having a high score. The student's evaluation score must also be outstanding, and he couldn't wait to see what Lin's evaluation scores would be. Inside the campaign, Bai Yuan and some other hunters were reviewing what had happened when the Abyss monster attacked. Lin's necromancer abilities were on full display. His strength was ridiculous, and besides being ridiculously strong, he was also decisive. He already had the makings of a top-tier hunter. Some of the hunters present believed that it would be hard to evaluate the candidates this year. However, others disagreed. Those students that ran away from the battle would receive a low score for being cowards. They couldn't decide, so they gave Lin an excellent score and continued discussing what to do about the other students. At the waiting area, the results were finally posted. Principal Liu rejoiced, saying Lin did it. He received the number 1 score. The other principals congratulated Principal Liu. And at the original examination site, Zia congratulated Lin for receiving the top score. Lin smiled and thanked her. Zia was surprised. She didn't know that Lin could smile, and his smile looked nice, so she asked him why he didn't smile more often. In the leaderboards, Lin was first. Zia was second with an evaluation score of 7,600. Feng Zhu was third with an evaluation score of 6,700. Zhuomei was fourth with over 6,300 points. Zihao was fifth, but his evaluation score was poor, and with a poor evaluation score, no academy in the top 20 would accept him. Zihao was enraged, and he complained about being rated as poor. The examiners decided to expel him for violating the exam rules. Then they announced that for the combat profession this year's top student was Lin. Gao cheered loudly in the middle of a crowd saying, "Do you see that? My friend is the top student in the entire province." The examiners asked Gao to be quiet and announced that Lin wasn't just the top student in the province, but he was the top student in the entire country. Principal Lu was beyond happy, and he could hear angels singing praise. This was something he could brag about for the rest of his life. The other students from Lin's school were also taking pride in the fact that a student from their school was now the top student of the whole country. Zhuo Mei and Feng Zhu approached Lin congratulating him and thanking him for saving them in the campaign. They asked him if he was trying to get into Jiajing Academy. Lin told them that he was, and they asked to meet up after he entered Jiajing Academy. Lin replied okay, and Zia apologized to Zhuo Mei and Feng Zhu, explaining that Lin doesn't like to talk much. Lin asked her what she was talking about when he had been talking a lot the whole day. Later that night at Lin's house, Lin grabbed the picture of him, his grandma, and his sister and told his grandma that he had become the #1 student in the country. He heard knocking on the door and got up to get it. It was Principal Lu, and he was joined by a hunter. The hunter that was with Principal Lu started emitting killing intent, so Lin summoned a skeleton warrior from the summon space. Bai Yuan was impressed that Lin reacted even though he was stronger than him. He stopped emitting his killing intent, and Lin could finally see that it was Bai Yuan. He lowered his head and greeted the #1 hunter. Bai Yuan told Lin that he wanted to talk about Jiajing Academy. So far he was impressed with Lin's reaction time and his composure. Lin sat the two down, and as he poured tea, Principal Lu asked Bai Yuan to forgive Lin's actions earlier and told him that Lin has been living alone since his sister went to Jiajing Academy. This impressed Bai Yuan further. Not only was Lin about to enter Jiajing Academy, his sister was already a student. Bai Yuan looked at Lin's skeleton warrior, shocked to see that they only had 250 points into each stats, but then how would he have been able to defeat the abyssal monster? Lin was shocked. It seemed like his theory was correct, and he was the only one who could see the talent-boosted stats of his skeleton warriors. Bai Yuan asked Lin if the skeleton stats had been boosted by his talent, and Lin informed the two that he awakened a talent that amplified all of his skills, shocking Principal Lu. However, this made sense to Bai Yuan, and he told Lin that he had two things to discuss with him. First was his reward from Jiajing Academy, and second he wanted him to take a test in 2 days. Lin asked him what kind of test he wanted him to take, and Bai Yuan explained that the test is for Jiajing Academy, and only Jiajing students can take part. But he couldn't give Lin more details about the test until he accepted to participate. Lin started thinking about the test. The decision of accepting was up to him. But there were too many unusual variables. Sensing that Lin might reject, Bai Yuan told him that the test would be a rare opportunity for him, and originally he wouldn't have been able to participate. Instantly Lin accepted, making Bai Yuan happy. He took out Lin's rewards, and as the top student in the nation, Lin's rewards were quite good. He received a card containing 100,000 points, which is equal in value to gold in Jiajing Academy. The second reward was 2 scrolls, 1 primary and 1 intermediate skill scroll. The third reward was based on his performance against the abyssal monster. He was given permission to enter the Divine Summer Tower once. Bai Yuan advised Lin to prepare well before he entered. Lin understood, especially because Bai Yuan was the one telling him to prepare. Bai Yuan gave Lin some time to clean himself up before he took him to Jiajing Academy. A while later the three met in front of Lin's house, and Bai Yuan teleported Lin to the entrance of Jiajing Academy. Bai Yuan explained to Lin that the gates of Jiajing Academy also functioned as a weapon, and even top-tier hunters would be injured if they tried to enter with force. He asked Lin to follow him, and brought Lin to the residential area. There, a fellow student greeted Bai Yuan. The student wondered who Lin was, since the strongest hunter was bringing him to Jiajing Academy, yet his tone was cold. The student asked Lin to choose a room he would like to stay in, and explained that they had various rooms. 4-person rooms which cost 500 points a month, 2-person rooms which cost 1,000 points a month, single rooms which cost 2,000 points a month, villa which cost 10,000 points a month. Finally, the practice villa, but the price remains unknown. The student tried to advise Lin to choose the 4-person room or 2-person rooms to save his points. However, Lin went with the single rooms, shocking the student. He brought Lin to his room, and since he was satisfied, he asked him for his card to pay. The student was shocked to see how many points Lin had, and he asked him how he managed to get so many. Lin explained that he got it for becoming the #1 student in the nation. The student now realized why Lin could afford staying in a single-person room. However, he thought it was a bit unfair because in his entire time in Jiajing Academy he only collected 10,000 points. But Lin was starting with 131,000 points. The student quickly left after advising Lin to get a communication device. After the student left, Lin observed some students who were training close by. Unlike his old school, the students of Zhejiang Academy were hard-working, and in that kind of atmosphere he is bound to level up quickly. To not fall behind, he started meditating. The next day his meditation came to an end when someone rang his doorbell. Lin opened the door, seeing a face he hadn't seen in a while. Ning grabbed Lin's hands, quickly pulling him along. She had made plans for the day, but first they should have breakfast. Inside Zhejiang cafeteria, after they had gotten their food, Lin took out his card to pay. However, Ning informed him that he could pay with coins. Lin told her that he didn't have points, and she says he should have asked because she had plenty, and didn't want him to waste points that are hard to earn. She looked at the receipt, happy that it was only 5 points, but something else caught her attention. Lin had over 130,000 points, and she questioned how he managed to get so many. A while later, while showing Lin around, she told him to avoid spending points as much as possible. Even if he had a lot, Lin told her that he would, and took out the Goblin King's core and gave it to her. She was captivated by the core, and she asked if it was the Goblin King's core. He told her that it was, and she went on a rant about how valuable the core is, and if he really planned on giving it to her for free. He told her that he didn't have a use for it, and she accepted without regret. She continued to show Lin around the campus of Zhejiang Academy, and afterwards she brought him to the Academic Affairs office to complete his enrollment. After finishing his enrollment, Lin looked up information about his sister, but nothing appeared. He asked Ning why he couldn't find his sister's information. She told him that his sister might be on a special confidential mission for the academy, or she might have joined a specialized section of Zhejiang Academy. She told him to stop worrying, since nothing bad should have happened to her, and asked him to follow her. She brought him to a classroom, telling the student Tao Dao that she brought the #1 student in the nation. Tao Dao introduced herself to Lin, telling him that she was level 23, and her class was Elf Knight. Lin did the same, and a student in the corner of the room expressed how disappointed he was that Lin was only level 17. He told Ning that she couldn't just bring random students. Ning confronted Ling Zhen, explaining that Lin was strong enough to become the top student in the nation. However, Zhen thought Lin's power wouldn't improve their hidden dragon team. He had seen the previous top student, but they were trash. He approached Lin, telling him not to act important just because Bai Yuan brought him to the academy. In their hidden dragon team, strength is all that mattered. He was willing to bring Lin along for the sake of the test, but he told him not to do anything stupid. His arrogance was worse than Zia's. Lin was starting to get irritated, and he asked Zhen why he sounded so jealous. This cut Zhen deep, and he started to chant a skill. Tao Dao activated a barrier protecting the other students from Zhen's energy. She asked Zhen to stop. He stopped in consideration for Tao Dao, and as he walked away, Tao Dao informed Lin that they would meet in the classroom the next day at 9 o'clock. She can only share more information about the test tomorrow, so she asked him to be understanding. Lin thanked her for giving him an opportunity, and Ning asked Lin to follow her so they could shop for the test. After Lin and Ning exited the room, Tao Dao told Zhen that she understood why he was acting this way. But Lin must be strong since Bai Yuan brought him to the academy, and they needed one more strong student for the test. Zhen told her that he wanted to see what kind of person replaced his brother as the top student. Tao Dao explained that Lin's achievements makes him qualified to be in their group, and his class is something they had never seen before. Zhen expressed that every year a new class appears, but most of them are trash, and Necromancer is probably the same. Outside the classroom, Ning told Lin that they needed to buy health potions, mana potions, and a communication device. A while later, after they had finished buying everything, Ning asked Lin to become friends with her on the communications device so she could talk to him all the time. And after Lin added her as a friend, she left so Lin could rest for the test tomorrow. To prepare for the test, Lin used the primary skill scroll and received the slow curse skill. The skill reduced the speed of his enemies, and after the talent amplification, the range increased to 50 meters, and the duration was also extended to 10 minutes. Lin's skills could now be categorized into 3 areas: summoning, DPS, and curse user. He hoped to learn another skill that would expand this category of skills even more. The next day, Ning called Lin on the communications device, asking him to come to the cafeteria for breakfast. A while later, all the members of the Hidden Dragon team had gathered inside the classroom. Tao Dao informed them that it could be dangerous after they teleported into the testing grounds, so they should stick together. Zhen took a shot at Lin, asking him not to slow them down. Lin remained unbothered. Ning, however, told Zhen that he would be the one to slow them down. Seeing the conflict in the group, Tao Dao expressed that the test was important, so whatever issues they had should stop after entering the testing grounds. She asked them to introduce themselves, and one by one the students gave their names and class. First was Mio Yu, a level 20 elf elder. Second, Duan Gao, a level 20 diviner. Third was Zhen, a level 20 warlock. Fourth was Tao Dao, a level 23 elf knight. Fifth was the Chad himself, Lin, a level 17 necromancer. Finally, last was Ning, a level 19 shadow assassin. After the introduction, Tao Dao activated the teleportation crystal for the Hidden Dragon team. They were teleported to the Divine Zia Tower. The map for the test was chosen, Mermaid Island. and again the students were teleported. In front of them was the mission stone that would give them the details of the test. All the members of the Hidden Dragon team placed their hands on the crystal and learnt that their objective is to defeat the final boss and obtain the Mermaid's Tear. Only a team of 6 students with an average level of 20 could take the test. The Mermaid's test only dropped on the Nightmare difficulty, and there's only 3 tiers to collect. In other words, only the top 3 teams would get the reward. In the end, their goal is to clear the dungeon the fastest. Cao Dao wasn't expecting that they would have the mermaid map. She had participated in a lot of tests, so Ning asked her why she was worried. Cao Dao explained that the Mermaid's Tear can be used to craft a special item, but Mermaid Island isn't a part of the territory of the Divine Xia Empire, so students from other countries also come to Mermaid Island every year. There were a total of 10 teams taking the test in Xiajing Academy, meaning they had to compete with fellow students and students from other countries. Ning asked her what they should do if they ran into a team from another country. Cao Dao told her that in all the tests before, the other teams just try to block the exits, but she shouldn't let her guard down because some students have died during the test. Seeing that Ning looked scared, Lin told her not to worry because he would protect her if they encountered a dangerous situation. With the members of the Hidden Dragon team ready, Duan activated his support skill, buffing the stats of each member. It was a 30% stat increase and a 30% skill damage increase, but they were nothing compared to the boost his talent had. He got curious about how the buff skill would affect his skeleton warriors, so he summoned one from the summoning space and asked Duan to apply his buff skill on the skeleton warrior. The skill failed, and Lin concluded that it's likely his talent is overriding the buff skill. Jen spoke, saying that if the skeleton warriors couldn't be buffed, then they would be as useless as their master. Lin and his skeleton warrior turned to Jen, asking him if he wanted to fight. However, Cao Dao stepped in, saying they could fight after the test. Jen was intimidated by Lin's skeleton. He doesn't know why, but every time the skeleton warrior looked at him, he froze. With the dispute settled, the Hidden Dragon team started heading towards the center of the Mermaid Island. Cao Dao explained that their target is the center of the island, and ordered them to avoid fighting monsters as much as possible. Suddenly, a merfolk jumped out of the lake that was close by and attacked. Thanks to Jen and Ning, they were able to defeat the merfolk, but Jen's fireball drew the attention of all the merfolk in the area. If they faced the monster head-on, it would take them 3 hours to reach the center of the island, which would be too slow. So Cao Dao put Mayo in charge of controlling the monsters so they could charge through. Mayo lifted her staff in the air and activated the wind bind spell, gathering all of the monsters together and creating an opening for the others to charge through. 20 minutes later, the path to the center had been blocked by more merfolk, and they were starting to fall behind the other groups. Cao Dao asked Mayo if her skill would be able to bind all of the monsters in front of them. Mayo informed her that there were too many enemies to control, and the monsters were now level 22, meaning her skill won't work on them. Charging in directly could put them in danger, but it would take too long to go around the monsters. Lin stepped up, telling Cao Dao that he could handle it. Jen laughed, asking Lin what a level 17 like him could do, explaining that it would be better if he continued to hide behind a woman. Cao Dao told Jen to shut his mouth, and she asked Lin what his plan was. Lin explained that he would use his skeleton warrior to distract the merfolk. Cao Dao decided to trust Lin's plan. Lin ordered the skeleton warrior to charge in and distract the monster, giving the group the opportunity to sneak past the monsters. After they were safe, Lin recalled the skeleton warrior to the summoning space. Cao Dao praised him on a job well done. However, Jen disagreed, explaining that they are safe because of the skeleton warrior, and Lin by himself is just trash. Lin faced Jen and told him that he only had one last chance to disrespect him. Mayo, who was keeping watch, called out to the group, telling them to run. The merfolk that Lin's skeleton was distracting had caught up. The students from the other country were also present. The other country's students had the spirit summoner profession. He activated one of his skills, blocking Lin's group path of escape. Mayo was stunned, and she asked Cao Dao why a student would do this. Cao Dao explained that he wanted to stop other students from reaching the center of the island. The student hopped on one of his summons and told Lin's group to use the mission stone to teleport away if they didn't want to get hurt. The student rode off on his summon, leaving his group behind. Cao Dao turned to Lin, asking him if there's anything his skeleton warrior could do. Lin summoned 2 skeleton warriors, one to draw the merfolk away, and the other to face off against the student's summon. With Lin's help, the other students were able to catch up to the other country's student, but they were intercepted by merfolk with bows and arrows. The group that was with Lin managed to protect themselves, however the other country's student was killed. After the first round, all of the teams in Xiajing Academy gathered. The other groups were looking for a powerful mage. Hearing this, Jen got an idea. He approached Cao Dao and told her he would join another team. He gave her a choice: either he leaves the group or they kick Lin out. He expected that Cao Dao would kick Lin out because the value of a mage had increased. However, Cao Dao decided to kick Jen out of the group. Cao Dao's words left Jen speechless. He questioned if he had heard correctly, and reminded the party that without him they wouldn't be able to pass the test. He then asked Cao Dao if she wanted to get into the creation seminary. Cao Dao asked Jen if he had forgotten what her profession is. She is an elven knight with a strong sense of morality. Lin has helped them during the test so far, so her morals wouldn't let her abandon him that easily. Jen angrily walked away, telling Cao Dao not to regret her decision. Lin approached Cao Dao and told her they should try to enter the dungeon again. Cao Dao was worried and reminded Lin of the battle going on outside the dungeon gate between the students. Ning managed to convince Cao Dao to trust Lin, and Duan and Mayo decided to follow along as well. Even though she agreed, Cao Dao still had her doubts, but if things were to get dangerous with her skills, she believed she could save the others. However, one thing she couldn't understand was why Ning trusted Lin so much. With this, they started walking in the direction of the dungeon gate. A while later they arrived and were in the middle of the battle. Lin confidently approached the dungeon gate, and the other followed suit. The students from the other cities warned Lin and his party not to get close, otherwise they would be forced to attack. The students from Jiajing Academy realized that Lin was the one who saved them previously, and they decided to protect him to repay the debt. Jen, who had joined the other city students, smiled and asked the Jiajing students if they wanted to die. Lin remained unbothered and continued to approach the dungeon gate. Since Lin didn't listen to their warning, the other city students launched their attack. Instantly, Cao Dao jumped in front of Lin with her shield to protect him. Lin summoned dozens of skeleton warriors. The skeleton warriors leaped forward, blocking the other city students' attacks. Cao Dao, Mayo, and Duan were completely stunned. They couldn't believe that Lin could actually summon that many skeleton warriors. The other city students complained, saying Lin's profession was too OP. All of their attacks did nothing to Lin's skeletons. Even though the skeletons looked like they would fall apart any moment, Lin continued to walk forward unbothered by their words. He reached the entrance of the dungeon and the other city students tried to stop him, but it was too late. Inside the dungeon, Cao Dao became concerned because Lin chose the nightmare difficulty. She was worried because she didn't know how they would clear it without Jen. Ning told her not to worry because Lin's skeletons were very strong. Cao Dao says if that's the case, I will do my best to block the monsters. Mayo spoke, saying they had nothing to worry about because she could heal and crowd control. Duan added that he would be providing buffs. Suddenly, they all received experience for killing a level 21 merfolk. This confused them and they looked around, questioning why they suddenly received experience. While looking around, they saw Lin's skeleton warrior defeat an elite merfolk warrior in one hit. Lin summoned 2 more skeleton warriors and commanded them to charge forward and kill any monster in their path. Lin followed closely behind his skeleton warriors as they charged forwards. Cao Dao was stunned. What Lin's skeleton warrior just killed in one hit would take the perfect party 1 or 2 minutes to kill. After telling the others to follow, Ning chased after Lin. Duan called out to Lin and Ning, asking them to wait so he could fully process what he just witnessed. Cao Dao told him to process while they followed behind Lin. The skeleton warriors charged forwards using the rage shot skill to kill all the merfolk they came across. Cao Dao was in disbelief. This is the first time she had been useless in a dungeon. Usually she would be in the front blocking attacks for her party. Even Mayo and Duan felt like they weren't needed. A while later they arrived at the end of a cliff. Ning looked down the cliff and saw a monster that looked like the mini-boss. She pointed the monster out to the others. Lin observed the merfolk queen's serpent. The serpent's stats were even higher than the goblin king's stats. Cao Dao approached the front line, saying she would block the monster's attack. However, Lin told her to step back because it wasn't necessary. Lin summoned another skeleton warrior and commanded the 3 skeleton warriors to jump down the cliff. After jumping down, the skeleton warriors did their best to attack the serpent, but it was too fast. Cao Dao asked Lin what he planned on doing because his skeleton warriors were too slow to land a hit on the serpent. Lin told her not to worry and activated the slow curse skill he acquired from the skill scroll. The skill slowed the serpent down and Lin's skeleton warriors were finally able to attack it. Lin had powerful summons and could even use curses, and Cao Dao started to question what else Lin's profession could do. The serpent used the Death Strangle skill and wrapped its body around one of Lin's skeletons, crushing its bones. It proceeded to use its venomous blast, but because Lin's skeletons were already undead, venom didn't have much of an effect. The skeleton warriors succeeded in killing the serpent. For killing the serpent, Lin received 50,000 experience and obtained silver grade armor, serpent scale armor, and an intermediate level monster's core. Duan and Mayo were having a hard time wrapping their minds around what they were witnessing. Without doing anything, they had gained so much experience. Cao Dao asked them to not get distracted and to follow closely behind Lin. The mini-boss name was Pet Serpent of the Queen of the Merfolk, and she was worried they would have to face the Merfolk Queen as the final boss. As they walked, the smell of fish continued to grow stronger, and they came across the castle of the Merfolk. Lin did a head count of the merfolk. Afterwards, he informed the others that there were 60 merfolk on patrol, which means there would be at least 180 of them. The others were concerned, but Lin wasn't because the more monsters the better. He summoned his skeleton warriors and commanded them to charge in. Cao Dao called out to Lin trying to stop him. Even though Lin's skeletons were strong, she still thought he was being rash. The merfolk noticed Lin's skeletons charging in and they attacked. The skeleton's warriors used the Berserk Strike skill, killing the merfolk in front of them in one hit. But all the commotion got the attention of the other merfolk on patrol. Lin asked the others to cover their ears and activated the corpse explosion skill. Instantly all of the merfolks were wiped out. Cao Dao and the others started to question why Lin's profession was so strong. It was their first time receiving so many notifications at once. The door to the palace opened and the queen of the merfolk was waiting inside. I will not be hearing anyone out in the comments. Ning and the others were captivated by the queen's beauty and they fell under her spell. They slowly started approaching the queen. However, Lin ain't no simp and wasn't affected by her spell. He quickly realized that the others had fallen for her spell. He used his skeleton warriors to stop them from getting closer to the queen. However, he didn't have a way to free them. Luckily, Mio managed to free herself from the queen's spell, and she used the skill A Clear Mind to free the others. After coming back to their senses, they questioned what had happened to them. Mio explained that they had fallen under the queen's enchantment magic. But Lin was unaffected and he stopped them from approaching the queen, in turn saving the entire party from getting wiped out. The queen looked around seeing the dead bodies of the merfolk. Seeing her dead children pushed the queen into a blinded rage. The once beautiful queen became an unrecognizable monster. The queen activated the fearsome shriek skill. Her shriek stirred waves of water like a violent storm. Cao Dao watched the queen closely. Given the type of skills she witnessed the queen using, she concluded that it would take a normal 6-man party at least an hour to beat her. But Lin has proven to be unordinary. She began to watch Lin instead. Lin sent his skeleton warriors to attack the queen. But her stats were now too high for the skeleton warriors to withstand her attacks. Watching the scene unfold in front of her gave Cao Dao the feeling like she was watching a small pack of wolves attack a lion. However, it was still hard for her to tell who would win. The merfolk queen threw her trident, destroying one of the skeleton warriors. Cao Dao noticed that the queen is likely to win against Lin's skeletons. She turned to Duan and asked him to prepare to buff them. She planned to charge in after the queen had killed all of Lin's skeletons. Lin told her not to worry and activated the slow curse skill. But the skill had no effect. In fact, the queen only saw it as a nuisance. She activated the billowing wave skill, freeing herself and destroying 12 of Lin's skeleton warriors. It looked like Lin's skeleton warriors wouldn't be able to defeat the merfolk queen. So Cao Dao decided it was their turn to step in. She asked Lin to call back his skeleton warriors. However, Lin just summoned all 87 skeleton warriors from the summon space. Cao Dao, Mio, and Duan were left speechless. They weren't able to grasp the number of skeleton warriors Lin could summon, and they were finally able to see why Ning believed in Lin so much. He is a one-man army. However, Ning was surprised as well. Lin became stronger like she expected he would. But he did so at a rate that far exceeded her expectations. The skeleton warriors charged in and started overwhelming the queen. As a last resort, the queen used the Tears of the Queen's skill. Mio became concerned because her level was too low to counter the queen's skill. Lin told her she had nothing to worry about. His vigor stat is high enough so he wouldn't be affected by the queen's skill. And his skeleton warriors are emotionless, fearless dead souls that didn't feel pain. Just as Lin thought, the queen's last resort had no effect and his skeleton warriors were able to defeat the queen. He received 80,000 experience, the silver rank item Queen of the Merfolk Sword, Queen of the Merfolk Staff, and the Tier of the Merfolk. Ning was excited. With the tier they were done with the test and were one step closer to the Academy of Genesis. Cao Dao added that once they finished the test and leveled a little bit more, they would be more than qualified to enter the Academy of Genesis. Duan and Mio also added that all of this wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for Lin. And the most disappointing thing was Zhen. They vowed to never team up with him again. Lin approached Ning asking if she had a cool-down talisman. She says she did and asked Lin if he was planning on doing the dungeon again. Lin told her he was and asked for the cool-down talisman. This left the others completely speechless. As Lin and his party members were teleported out of the dungeon, the other city students were shocked because it hasn't even been half an hour since they entered. Some of the other city students thought Lin and his party ran away after coming in contact with some monsters, and some of them were saying Lin's skeletons are just for show. The other Ziajing Academy students told Lin that it's okay if they didn't clear the dungeon. All that matters is their safety. Zhen was surprised they didn't die and questioned why they entered the dungeon if they couldn't clear it. While the other students were busy gossiping, Cao Dao turned to Ning and told her to begin the plan they discussed inside the dungeon. Ning activated the cooldown talisman and teleported her and Lin back inside the dungeon. Cao Dao was feeling nervous about sending just Lin and Ning into the dungeon. But Mio reminded her that they had just seen Lin's combat capabilities, so she was sure they would be fine. Cao Dao realized that there was no reason to worry. She had just seen Lin solo clear the dungeon in nightmare difficulty. Inside the dungeon, Ning says she wasn't expecting that Lin would be helping her level up so soon. She told him to give it his all and not give up halfway. She also says the cooldown talisman could be used one more time after they clear the dungeon, so she wanted them to make use of this opportunity and grab all the merfolk's tears. She wanted them to clear the dungeon as quickly as possible. As the two discussed, a merfolk was lurking in a nearby pond. Lin noticed the merfolk and quickly ordered his skeletons to deal with it. Afterwards, Lin told her not to worry because when it came to clearing dungeons, he was the fastest. A few minutes later, they arrived at the merfolk queen's serpent's den and slayed it. Previously, it took them half an hour to reach the serpent's den, but now it only took them 5 minutes. Ning was impressed, and she told Lin he was more amazing than she thought. Lin thanked her and said they should head to the merfolk palace. With the skeletons leading the charge, they were able to easily make their way to the palace and slay the guards. The merfolk's queen came out of the palace, and Ning hid behind Lin. She thought if she didn't look at the queen, she wouldn't fall for her mesmerized spell. From behind, Ning told Lin to destroy the merfolk queen. Lin used the curse spell and corpse explosion, one-shotting the merfolk queen. Ning leveled up and she turned to Lin saying they should quickly go another round and get the final merfolk tier. When Lin first met Ning, she was level 19 and he was level 10, and she just now managed to hit level 20. Lin concluded that Ning doesn't like farming for levels. The two of them were teleported outside the dungeon, shocking the other students. They turned to each other questioning what Lin and Ning were able to do in just 10 minutes. Ning called out to Cao Dao and the others, telling them that they finished the dungeon and used the cooldown talisman again. Cao Dao and the others looked at each other questioning if Lin was really able to clear the dungeon in less than 10 minutes. Mayo told her Lin was more capable than they thought. Inside the dungeon, Ning challenged Lin. She set a timer to see if Lin could clear the dungeon faster this time. Lin isn't one to back down from a challenge, so he accepted, and 9 minutes later Lin killed the merfolk queen. This was 30 seconds faster than before. Lin turned to Ning saying they should return since they were done. They quickly exited the dungeon. Ning was especially excited to see how the other students would react when they saw they had the 3 merfolk tears. Outside the dungeon, the other students gathered at the entrance awaiting Lin and Ning's return. As Lin and Ning returned, they gossiped among each other saying they wasted a talisman. And because there's no way Lin could clear a dungeon in 9 minutes, they guessed he ran away without even fighting a monster. Cao Dao approached Ning asking her how things went. Ning told her that they were able to get the other 2 merfolk tears. The dungeon began to close, shocking the other students. They questioned why the dungeon was closing all of a sudden. One of them explained that the dungeon is only supposed to close once all 3 of the merfolk tears were gone. Lin told Cao Dao that since they had everything they came for, they should get going. But a student with the summon profession from the other city rushed at them saying he would take the merfolk tears from Lin. The other students found it hard to believe that Lin was really able to solo the merfolk dungeon, but they couldn't let him get away with the merfolk tears. So they joined the summoner student and attacked Lin. The summoner student activated his summon skill, summoning 3 giant monsters. Lin summoned his skeleton and they wiped out one of the summons in one hit. This shocked Lin because he wasn't expecting the summons to be so weak. The summoner student began to suffer the recoil of losing one of his summons. Lin summoned a few more skeletons to take out the other summons. The summoner jumped on one of his summons and began running away. The other students who were rushing stopped. They began to question how Lin's skeletons were so strong. The summoner thought Lin had definitely awakened a talent, and since a powerful student had shown up, he had to report it. The other student also began running away from Lin and his skeletons. The student of Ziyajing Academy burst out laughing at the sight of the other city students running away. They all decided that from now on Lin would become their role model. Zhen regretted leaving the party because he would have been able to complete the trial. Angry because he failed the test, he promised to get his revenge on Lin. Later in a classroom in Ziyajing Academy, Cao Dao thanked Lin for carrying her through the dungeon. This trial was very important to her. Lin didn't answer, making her feel bad. Ning told Cao Dao not to feel bad because even though Lin doesn't talk much, he was a good person. Lin received a message from Bai Yuan asking him to come to the dean's office. Inside the dean's office, Bai Yuan told Lin that he had the best performances during the trials this time as well. Lin thanked him but says he just did the best he could. Lin's humble personality further impressed Bai Yuan and he asked him if he knew what the merfolk tear is used for. Lin responded to Bai Yuan saying he doesn't, and asked himself if he just got another important item without realizing. Bai Yuan explained that the merfolk tears are useful in increasing the success rate of awakening a talent at level 40. And even if the level of the merfolk tear is low, it's still important to the process. Bai Yuan didn't expect Sakura Kingdom to find the location of the merfolk dungeon, and their students almost brought the failure of the trial. Luckily Lin was present and managed to bring back all 3 tears for Shenzia. Bai Yuan asked Lin if he wanted anything in return for his accomplishments. Right now Lin can't find any information about his sister, so he questioned if he should use this opportunity to ask about his sister. He decided that this opportunity would be best used to find out more information about his sister, and he asked Bai Yuan if he could help him find his sister. Bai Yuan knew Lin was going to ask about his sister, and says his sister joined the creation seminary at the beginning of the year, so Lin won't be able to find any information. All of the students in the creation seminary have no information listed in the database, and his sister is no different. This surprised Lin because the creation seminary was Tao Dao, Xia, and Ning's goal. He didn't expect his sister would enroll in that faction too, and is surprised she had the skills to be accepted. Bai Yuan told Lin that he wouldn't be able to see his sister unless he joins the creation seminary, so if he had any question he should try joining. He sent Lin the admission requirements for the creation seminary and says since he couldn't answer Lin's question about his sister, Lin could ask for something else. Lin told Bai Yuan that he wanted a cooldown talisman. The cooldown talisman is extremely rare and can't be bought from a market. It is also the item that Lin needed the most right now. Bai Yuan chuckled, saying after seeing Lin's performance during the trial he guessed he would ask for this. But the cooldown talisman is not something the school can buy easily, so he wanted Lin to complete another task before he gave him a cooldown talisman. With the cooldown talisman, Lin can level up faster and quickly join the creation seminary to see his sister, so Lin asked Bai Yuan for the task. Bai Yuan took out a teleportation stone and told Lin he needs to be level 20 for the task he wanted to assign him. He says if Lin was in a hurry to level up he could make his way to the dungeon hall and farm levels. He handed Lin the teleportation stone, explaining that the school didn't hand out teleportation stones to just anyone. Lin took the teleportation stone, thanking Bai Yuan, and instantly used it. This shocked Bai Yuan because he was expecting Lin to rest since he just finished the trial. Inside the dungeon, Lin looked around surprised to see the amount of dungeons in the dungeon hall. He looked at the requirements for the creation seminary and saw he needed to be over level 30. He was also impressed by his sister because she managed to reach over level 30 after 4 months in Xiajing Academy. The second requirement for the creation seminary is to clear the level 30 dungeon, Abyss Frontlines on Hell difficulty, and the third requirement is to reach 1000 contribution points. Lin knew he couldn't complete the second difficulty on his own, so he wanted to complete the third requirement, but he didn't know how to get contribution points. A blonde-haired girl approached him asking if it was his first time in the dungeon hall. Shu Han introduced herself to Lin and says she could show him around the dungeon hall and explain everything for a price. Lin asked how many points she was charging, and she said 100. Lin paid her the 100 points and she took him around the dungeon hall explaining how things worked. In the dungeon hall there were 2 dungeons below level 20, 18 dungeons between level 20 and 30, 20 dungeons between level 30 and 40, 52 dungeons between level 40 and 70. In addition, there are 2 large dungeons that can hold more than 40 people, and 1 large dungeon that can hold over 100 people. In total, there were 95 dungeons in the dungeon hall. Each dungeon has a clear record set by a party. Setting a new clear record gives more rewards. Han brought him to the task and teammate recruitment center and explained that Lin can earn points here or recruit teammates. She asked Lin if he had any questions, and Lin asked her how he can get contribution points. She says he can earn contribution points by practicing in trials and completing tasks. Lin looked at a board showing how much contribution points a task can give. He gets disappointed because most tasks only give 2 to 3 points. Han says getting contribution points is difficult because anytime one that gives a lot of points is posted, it is quickly taken by another student. It is a battle for points because points are needed to get into the creation seminary. Lin received a notification from his communication device telling him he received 50 points from the trial. Lin thanked Han for showing him around the dungeon hall and approached one of the dungeons below level 20. The record for the dungeon is 1 hour and 17 minutes. No one had been able to beat the record in 3 years. Lin entered the dungeon prepared to beat the previous record. The other students present in the hall gossiped among themselves. They thought Lin was a big shot, but turns out he is just some guy below level 20. Inside the dungeon, Lin summoned his skeleton warriors and ordered them to spread out and wipe out the monsters they came across. He was excited to see how much his level would increase after the dungeon. The death message started popping up like crazy, making Lin realize his skeletons could handle the small fries, so he made his way to the boss to save time. A little later, he found the mutated dragon turtle, the boss of the dungeon, hiding in a pond. Seeing Lin on the edge of the water, the turtle jumped out of the pond. Just from the look of the turtle, Lin could tell its defense was higher than the merfolk queen. He summoned his skeleton warriors to attack the turtle in the air. The turtle used super defense, greatly reducing the damage Lin's skeletons were doing. Lin could now understand why no one had managed to break the record in 3 years. And since he was in a rush, he used the skill Soul Blaze on the turtle. The turtle flipped over and Lin's skeletons were able to deal the finishing blow. Lin's experience bar went up by 35%. And one more clear will bring him to level 18. He started wondering what he will receive for setting a new record. Inside the dungeon hall, a bell was rung signaling someone has set a new record. The students gathered around said dungeon, surprised to see Lin did it solo. For setting a new record, Lin received 1,000 points and 5 contribution points. Since he could get contribution points by setting records, Lin looked for another dungeon. The students observed him, questioning if he was going to set another record. A level 30 asked the others if it would be embarrassing if he asked Lin to carry him. Lin chose a dungeon, but he needed to be level 18, so he made his way back to the one he just set a record in. 30 minutes later, he stepped out of the dungeon and he was level 18. He also broke his own record. The students present began to question where such a godly person came from, and if he would be able to break all of the records. Lin approached the Spider Nest dungeon. It had a record that nobody had broken in 3 years as well, and the record was set by a party. He apologized to the previous record holder, saying he needed the points, and selected the Nightmare difficulty. Inside the dungeon, Lin wandered around questioning if he was inside the spider nest. It was so dark that he couldn't see anything. He activated the Soul Flame skill to light up his surroundings. He continued to wander around and quickly realized the dungeon resembled a maze. It looked like the only way out of the maze was with his skeletons. He summoned a few skeleton warriors from the summon space and ordered them to spread out. The skeletons made their way through the maze, killing the spider monsters they came across, and because Lin always knew where his skeletons were, he was beginning to map out the maze. The maze had many turns, and from the amount of notification, Lin could tell the paths are filled with monsters. He was progressing slower than he wanted. While following his skeleton's path, Lin came across small spiders. He observed the spiders. The spiders were smaller than previous monsters he encountered. Lin began to question if they were monsters. But this was definitely one of the paths his skeleton warriors took. Lin decided to conduct an experiment. He used the Soul Flame skill on a group of spiders, killing them instantly. In just that one attack, he killed at least 100 spiders, and the experience he got was equivalent to 20 elite monsters of the same level. He concluded from his experiment that the spider dungeon was the best place to level up. Lin summoned a skeleton warrior and ordered it to kill the small spiders. However, the small spiders quickly overwhelmed his skeleton and began depleting its health slowly. Lin tried to return the skeleton to the summoned space as he always does while fighting a boss, but his return call failed. This surprised Lin, and he wondered why he couldn't return the skeleton to the summoned space. Looking at his skeleton that was covered with spiders, Lin questioned if there were too many spiders on the skeleton's body for it to be returned to the summoned space. He quickly used the skill Corpse Explosion, killing all the spiders that had swarmed the skeleton warrior's body. At first, Lin wanted to finish the spider dungeon as quickly as he could, but now that he knows the dungeon is good for farming experience, he didn't want to waste it. He sent out his 108 skeleton warriors in groups of 10 so they wouldn't be taken out by the small spiders, and he followed behind them. 10 minutes later, Lin arrived at the Spider King's lair. Lin asked the boss if it enjoyed sending little ones to fight for him, and says it was his turn, and summoned his skeleton warriors. Outside the dungeon, Han asked the other students who were waiting on Lin if it was possible to solo the spider nest. The other students say the spider nest is the best place to farm experience and equipment. But it wasn't easy to clear. Another student says it's been 1 hour since Lin went into the dungeon, and the record was 1 hour 12 minutes. It wasn't looking like Lin would set a new record. Later, inside the dungeon, Lin had defeated the Spider King, and his experience bar went up by 80%. But the fight dragged out longer than he wanted, and it's already been 1 hour and 32 minutes. He would have to clear the spider nest again since getting the contribution points is a must. Outside the dungeon, Han was getting concerned. It's already been 1.5 hours since Lin entered the spider's nest, and she was beginning to wonder if Lin lost his life. Lin was teleported out of the dungeon, and Han quickly approached him, asking him if he managed to clear the dungeon. She says it's alright if Lin wasn't able to clear the spider's nest. She told him because of the monster it's near impossible to clear solo. Lin thanked her for her concern but says he cleared the dungeon. This surprised Han. Even though Lin didn't get the record, his speed was close to the record. And what's more, Lin looked so carefree, like clearing the spider's nest was a walk in the park for him. Lin was bothered. Although the experience the spider's nest gave was good, its clear time was too long. He asked Han if she knew what dungeon gave the most experience in the dungeon hall. Han took a moment thinking about Lin's question. She says among the dungeons below level 25 the spider's nest gave the most experience. There was no doubt the spider's nest gave a lot of experience. Clearing it once is like clearing the mutated forest 4 times. However, if Lin wanted to farm the spider's nest, he would have to spend 40 points to reset the cooldown. Lin turned to Han again and asked if there was a dungeon that's fast to clear but gives a lot of experience. Han took a moment and quickly pointed out a dungeon. She told Lin he could try teaming up with others to enter the Tyrant Desert large dungeon. She explained that although the dungeon requires level 25, level 20s could enter as well. And there were many high-level players who earned points by bringing newcomers with them to clear the dungeon. The first thing that came to Lin's mind after hearing about the large dungeon was to see if he could solo clear it. However, only students level 20 and above could enter the dungeon, and Bai Yuan's quest for Lin also required him to be level 20. It was time for him to grind. He thanked Han and started heading toward the Spider's Nest dungeon portal. Han called out to him and asked if he was still going to try clearing the Spider's Nest solo. However, Lin didn't respond. He simply entered the dungeon. Inside the dungeon, Lin smiled at the little spiders and says he is here to farm them for experience. Inside a room, Bai Yuan and some other hunters were watching a video of Lin defeating the Spider King. He asked the other hunters if they were as shocked as him. Bai Yuan says even though he's seen Lin fight before, he was still startled after watching the video. Manhwa expressed that one person solo clearing the merfolk and taking all 3 merfolk's tiers had never been done before, but now he is doing something even more unbelievable. Hongshan, who is the dean of Qianlong Academy, says, the students from Qianlong can't even compare to Lin. Meng nervously asked Bai Yuan if Lin had awakened a talent. Bai Yuan told him Lin awakened an enhancing talent, but he doesn't know how many times it enhances his skills. After watching the video from the trial and of Lin facing off against the Spider King, Meng concluded that Lin would have a bright future. Bai Yuan agreed and said Lin's sister already joined the creation seminary. Bai Yuan says Lin's sister is still favored by that old guy and he is helping her fully mature. Bai Yuan continued on saying the old guy trained all the elites of the human race. He thinks that Lin is also likely to be taken in by the old guy. From what men could see, the human race will have 2 new stars, Hongshan added, saying from what he could see Lin will become a one-man army capable of fighting against thousands. Back inside the dungeon, Lin decided not to kill all of the little spiders this time, but after killing the Spider King, the experience he got from the dungeon only decreased by 10%. And he was certain he broke the record this time. Inside the dungeon hall, the bell rang again, signaling someone set a new record. However, this time the students weren't surprised and told the ones that looked stunned that it was Lin. Jen, who was in the dungeon hall, says to the others that Lin isn't so great, and that he just got lucky. The other students asked him why he was saying this, and he explained that Lin has some connections with Bai Yuan, and probably got a powerful treasure from him. That is the only possible conclusion he could come up with for why Lin could solo clear a dungeon on nightmare difficulty. Han and some other students stood up to Jen and asked if he had any evidence. At the same time, Lin was teleported out of the dungeon and they informed him that someone was slandering his name. Lin looked over at Jen, questioning why he had to see his ugly mug again. Jen told Lin to stop pretending and asked him to come clean about Bai Yuan's support. Lin says he has ignored Jen for long enough and summoned a skeleton warrior. However, he was at the academy and shouldn't just act how he wanted. Jen was completely terrified of the skeleton warrior's gaze. However, he tried acting strong and asked Lin if he thought he was scared of him. Lin looked at his level and experience bar, questioning why he was wasting time with this trash when he needs to reach level 20 today. He entered the Spider's Nest again because he should level up if he cleared it again. After entering the dungeon, his skeleton warriors quickly fought through the small spiders and he made his way to the Spider King's nest. After defeating the Spider King again, he leveled up and quickly checked his level to see how much his stats had increased. Lin noticed that his summoning skill leveled up. He summoned one of the skeleton warriors to see what a silver grade skeleton warrior looked like. However, he is surprised because summoning it used 500 spirit. After the increases by his talent, the silver grade skeleton warrior's stats is now equivalent to a dungeon boss, and its skill also leveled up. The spirit cost to summon the new skeleton warriors was too high and his current equipment is getting too weak. It was time to change them. He also wanted to sell the silver grade equipment. He had to buy more skill scrolls. After Lin exited the Spider's Nest, the other students were shocked because Lin was able to level up 2 times in one day. He made his way to the trading area, where he took out the equipment he wanted to sell and told the cashier that he wanted to trade them in for gold and use the gold to buy a beginner-level skill scroll. The cashier was surprised that a level 20 had this much silver-grade equipment. He gathered all of Lin's equipment and asked Lin why he was selling the equipment instead of using them. Lin did need new equipment, but he thought ordinary silver-grade equipment would be of little use to him. Lin had too much stuff for the cashier to carry. He dropped one of Lin's equipment, but luckily Lin was able to catch it before it hit the ground. Even though equipment had skill-enhancing effects, it doesn't compare to the boost his talent gave. The cashier thanked Lin and says if he didn't want to use the equipment that could be bought with gold, he could look in the points store to see if there was anything he liked. Lin asked the cashier to bring him to the point shop. A little while later they arrived at the point shop. The cashier left Lin to look around while he sold the equipment. Lin went around the point shop looking at the different weapons. He was surprised because the equipment in the point shop was way better, and they had a set bonus too. However, the price wasn't cheap. Lin moved on to a set of armor that could increase his spirit by 800. But even though the spirit increase was good, that's all the bonuses the armor had. As he made his way around the point shop, he came across some students who were observing a weapon that cost 50,000 points. Lin was drawn to the price because it must be good if it was that price. The weapon was also something not many people in the academy could afford. The weapon's name is Danata Scythe, a growth-type weapon. It was part of the Death Spirit set and could absorb souls of the Abyss to gain experience points. It also consumes spirit to summon a deceased hero general. The hero general will inspire and form an army with undead summons. Lin looked at the scythe, tempted to buy it. His skeleton warriors were in need of a leader, and the scythe was also part of a set. Although the scythe has no attributes right now and would be considered pure garbage to others, it was perfectly made for him and he could use it to absorb the souls of abyss demons. He grabbed the scythe and concluded that he needed to add it to his arsenal. Lin made his way to the cashier and told him he wanted to buy the scythe. The cashier asked Lin if he saw the price tag correctly. Lin told him he did and handed him his card. The cashier swiped the card, surprised to see that Lin had 130,000 points. He couldn't believe it. That scythe has been in the trading center for a very long time, and he never thought a person would buy it. Lin left the trading center with the scythe and a lot of skill scrolls. There were no abyss demons for him to try the scythe on, so he used the scrolls to get some new skills. With the amount of scrolls he had, he should be able to get at least a few new skills. A while later in his apartment, he sat down and began using the scrolls. The first one gave him the skill Skeleton Armor. The skill summons skeletons to form armor, providing 100 points of physical defense. It was a skill that could help protect him, so Lin was happy about it. And with his talent, the 100 physical defense increase would become 1000. He activated the skeleton armor to see how it looked. Then he used another skill scroll. This time he got the ability to summon dark iron grade skeleton mages. Like him, the skeleton mage's spirit is high, and with this his skeleton army could now attack from afar, and if he continued to level up and train the skill, the skeleton mages will only get stronger. The next day Lin woke up to his spirit fully restored, so it was time to ask Bai Yuan about the task. He made his way to Bai Yuan's office and told him he was already level 20. Bai Yuan was shocked that Lin was already level 20 when it hasn't even been a day. Lin's speed is even faster than his. Both Lin and his sister were monsters. He took out some documents and told Lin that the task was simple. He just needed to help him get something. Bai Yuan asked Lin to go to the Tyrant Dungeon and retrieve the Tyrant Heart. Since it was a large dungeon, he felt he didn't have to say much about the difficulty. He told Lin that as long as he brought the Tyrant's Heart back within 3 days, he would get him a cooldown talisman. Bai Yuan says the cooldown talisman is a better item than Lin could ever imagine. The cooldown of some dungeons can reach 1 month, and in this instance a cooldown talisman really comes in clutch. Moreover, beginner's cooldown talisman can be upgraded to advanced level talisman, and if Lin completes his task he will tell him how to upgrade the talisman for free. Lin was shocked. He didn't know the cooldown talisman could be upgraded. Bai Yuan approached Lin and put his hand on his shoulder. He told Lin to bring the heart back within the 3 days because the school will be holding its opening ceremony in 3 days, and he didn't want Lin to be late. As Lin exited Bai Yuan's office, Meng entered asking Bai Yuan if he was satisfied with Lin. Bai Yuan says the more he watches Lin, the more satisfied he becomes. He says Lin's quiet, but it's better than him being cocky. Meng says with the way Lin is, he would definitely try to clear the dungeon by himself. This reminded him of the time when Bai Yuan entered a level 30 dungeon and came out with nothing. Bai Yuan laughed and says Lin was way stronger than he was back then. The next day Lin went back to the dungeon hall and he checked the information for the Desert Tyrant dungeon. The other students quickly recognized Lin from the day before, and since Lin was checking the information for the Desert Tyrant dungeon, they began to wonder if Lin was here to break the record for the Desert Tyrant dungeon. The record holder for the dungeon is Feilong Academy. Lin guessed that Feilong Academy is on par with the Serpent Dragon Academy, but he questioned why it took them 16 hours to clear the dungeon when they had a team of 40 hunters. Han approached Lin. She was shocked to see Lin in the dungeon hall again today. She asked him if he plans on entering the Desert Tyrant dungeon. Lin cleared so many dungeons yesterday, so she thought he would rest today. Lin told her he was, and said he wanted to acquire the Tyrant Heart. Han was shocked. The Tyrant Heart only drops from the final boss. She explained that it's possible to craft a powerful accessory with the Tyrant Heart, but the Tyrant Heart itself is rare. It only drops once a year, and the last time a team was able to get the Tyrant Heart was 2 years ago. Han asked Lin if he really planned on challenging the Desert Tyrant dungeon by himself. She protested against the idea, saying it's too dangerous because he doesn't have a team and he just reached level 20 yesterday. She asked Lin to try and find a team in the dungeon hall. Lin remained silent, so she reminded him that the record for the dungeon hasn't been broken in 4 years, and it took a team of 40 hunters to set the record. As the two were discussing, a team of young hunters entered the dungeon hall and approached Lin and the Desert Tyrant dungeon. The students in the dungeon hall recognized them as the team from Bylai Academy that's been preparing to take on the Desert Tyrant dungeon for a long time. And from the looks of it, they were ready. Each member of the party was wearing a set of gold-level armor. The leader of the Bylai Academy's team pulled his party aside, and he told them that today they must set a new record. He says they have prepared too much to have someone mess up today. He looked to his side, finally noticing Lin and Han. He began to wonder if Lin and Han were also planning to enter the dungeon. Lin began making his way up the stairs to the Desert Tyrant dungeon, and the other students began to gossip. They asked among themselves if anyone had been able to solo clear the Desert Tyrant dungeon. A student says this is a first, and if Lin succeeds, he'll make history. The leader of Bylai Academy's party observed Lin, questioning if he planned on entering the Desert Tyrant dungeon alone. He hadn't seen Lin before, and Lin was entering a large-scale dungeon alone, so he thought he was a newbie. He also wondered why no one told Lin a large-scale dungeon was difficult to clear even with 40 people. He turned to his party and told them not to pay attention to a fool like Lin. He then ordered them to prepare for teleportation. Inside the dungeon, Lin was having a hard time determining his location. The sun was directly overhead, and since it was a large-scale dungeon, he concluded that the dungeon might be enormous. He summoned some skeleton warriors and spread them out in all directions, and he tracked them. Entering a large-scale dungeon costs 500 points each time, and refreshing the cooldown costs 2,000 points. Looking at it this way, Lin's remaining 80,000 points won't last long. The skeletons came across their first monster, a desert ghost tree. Lin was taken aback by the monster because its stats were comparable to a level 24 boss in the mermaid dungeon. His skeleton warriors began attacking the desert ghost tree, but this time they couldn't one-shot it, and if it wasn't for his skeleton warriors leveling up to silver grade, taking on the ghost trees would have been difficult. His skeletons were able to kill the ghost tree, and Lin got experience comparable to a boss monster. Lin thought the dungeon was a leveling paradise. He took out his scythe and activated his skeleton armor skill. Lin wanted to be safe since danger lurks in the dunes. Lin made his way through the dungeon surrounded by his skeleton warriors. And 2 hours later he came across an oasis. Lin stood back and he sent his skeleton warriors to check it out first. He thought other monsters were gathered nearby, and just as he suspected, his skeletons were attacked by an oasis giant scorpion. This made him happy. He sent his skeletons to check it out first. His skeletons used the rage shot skill, killing the scorpion. With a moment to breathe, Lin looked around and noticed a group of scorpions surrounding a tree with fruit. This shocked him because he never heard of a dungeon producing consumable items. He summoned a skeleton warrior and ordered it to go pick a fruit for him. He had the others block the scorpions while the other one collected the fruit. The skeleton warrior brought the fruit back and Lin grabbed it, wondering what effects it would have. The fruit's name is Desert Oasis Fruit, and he learnt that it could rapidly restore a large amount of spiritual power, but the fruit must be consumed within 5 minutes of it being picked. Lin ate the fruit and his spiritual power began to recover rapidly. As long as there are enough fruits here, his spirit would never run out no matter what he does. Lin smiled, because this place is a sanctuary for practicing his skills and leveling them up. He summoned a skeleton mage. He had been wondering how he would upgrade the skeleton mage summoning skill, and this just provided the perfect opportunity. His spirit can be replenished continuously, so he can keep summoning the skeleton mages. He wanted the skill to reach level 20 so the skeleton mages could reach silver tier like his skeleton warriors. 3 hours later he reached level 20 on the skeleton mage summoning skill. Lin summoned 4 skeleton mages, one with the explosive flame skill, one with the thunderstorm skill, one with the ice spear skill, and one with the tornado skill. He turned to the scorpions and he asked them if they were having fun killing his skeletons. He said it was his turn to return the favor. Using their skills, Lin's skeleton mages wiped out the group of scorpions in front of them. However, a large group of scorpions appeared. Lin grabbed a fruit from his inventory and smiled. The large-scale dungeon was finally living up to his expectations. He says the dungeon wasn't the only one with an army. Lin summoned his army of skeleton warriors to match the scorpions. As long as the other monsters in the dungeon were on the same level as the scorpions in the ghost tree, Lin thought he could solo the dungeon. Lin's skeleton mages activated their skills providing corpses so Lin could use Corpse Explosion. Corpse Explosion paired with his skeleton mage skill provided cover while his skeleton warriors slayed the scorpions. A while later there were no monsters left at the oasis. Lin was saddened by this because he forgot to level up his other skills. He thought the dungeon would be perfect if the monsters spawned in groups like that continuously. But since he was able to get his skeleton mages to silver grade, it was time to locate the boss. The longer he dragged things out, the lower his chances are of getting the tyrant heart. As he walked through the desert, he noticed a dust cloud approaching quickly from behind. He activated his skeleton armor skill and jumped high into the air, where he noticed that the dust cloud was a horde of soldier ants. Lin landed on a dune wondering where the ants were going in such a hurry. He tailed the soldier ants and they led him to their nest. He made his way through the nest and came across a desert flying ant. The flying ants are considered the personal troops for the queen ant. The flying ant noticed Lin and attacked. However, it wasn't doing a lot of damage because of Lin's skeleton armor skill. Lin asked the ant if it was trying to bully him because he didn't level up his skeleton armor skill at the oasis. He summoned a skeleton mage and took out the flying ant. However, the mage's attack drew an army of ants to their location. Lin summoned his skeleton warriors and more skeleton mages. He ordered his skeleton warriors to find the queen ant while he and the mages handled the ants alone. The skeleton warriors left and Lin and his skeleton mages began wiping out the army of ants. However, it seemed like there was no end to the ants. A few minutes later, his skeletons were able to locate the boss and they alerted Lin. Lin looked at his map and was happy his skeletons were able to find the boss quickly. He wanted to head over to the boss so he could introduce himself. Lin made his way to the boss room and saw the queen surrounded by her personal army. He became disappointed after seeing the boss because it didn't look challenging. He ordered his skeleton warriors to finish the queen ant quickly. However, as his skeleton approached, the queen ant used the storm strike skill. The skill was on the same grade as his skeleton warriors and it did some damage to Lin and his skeletons. Lin managed to survive because he had the skeleton armor skill active. Lin recalled his skeleton mages from their previous location and summoned them again. Then he ordered them to stall the queen's personal guard while the skeleton warriors attacked the queen ant. The skeleton mages were able to kill the queen's personal guard, but the skeleton warriors were pushed back by the queen's shockwave skill. After pushing the skeleton warriors back, the queen curled into a ball and activated the ant summoning skill. Lin thought the queen was using a defensive skill. He didn't want to waste his time, so he summoned more skeleton warriors. The queen's skill activated and an army of ants appeared. Lin smiled. The queen was basically begging to die. He activated the corpse explosion skill, wiping out the army of ants and the queen. As a reward for defeating the ant queen, Lin received 80,000 experience, 1 silver grade queen ant's spear, 1 silver grade queen ant's ring, and the queen ant's egg. He was happy because the items he obtained from the queen ant can be sold for a lot of gold. And for just killing the scorpions at the oasis and wiping out the ant's nest, his experience bar increased by 78%. The dungeon was truly a great place to farm levels, but unfortunately he doesn't have a lot of time left. For now he needs to find the tyrant heart quickly, so he decided to come back to farm levels next time. 2 hours later, after fighting giant death worms, Lin came across a fortress. Inside the fortress, the lion tyrant, a world-level leader, sat on his throne, with his army knelt in front of him awaiting a challenger. Lin approached the lion tyrant's fortress and began observing from afar. The lion tyrant had gathered his army in front of the gate, and it seemed like Lin would have to go against 100 lion warriors. He continued to observe, and he noticed the lion archers on the walls of the fortress. Just the lion archers alone had higher stats than the soldier ants and flying ants. So Lin was a bit concerned. As he continued to approach, one of the desert lion warriors noticed him, and it signaled for the other lions. The desert lion warriors quickly got into formation, and they blocked the gate. This means Lin couldn't use the same tactic he used to deal with the scorpions and ants. But he wasn't concerned about the size of the lion tyrant's army, because his skeleton warriors could now move as an army as well. Lin summoned 4 skeleton generals and a few skeleton warriors. He ordered the skeleton generals to lead his army to victory. The battle ensued, and Lin's skeletons were quickly gaining the upper hand. A lion warrior signaled to the lion archers to fire. But the arrows did not faze Lin's army. They continued to push through and were soon able to break through the formation of the lions. Lin became disappointed because most of the lions' corpses were inside the castle, which was stopping him from using corpse explosion and ending the battle in an instant. Either way, it didn't matter because his army was close to the gate. A short while later, Lin's army arrived at the gate, and Lin summoned his skeleton mages to destroy the gate. The 4 skeleton mages used their skills, but it had no effect. Lin was confused at first because he thought his skeleton mages should have enough firepower, but he quickly realized that since he was in a large-scale dungeon, he would have to find a different way to open the door and get to the final boss. But it could also be that his mages didn't have enough firepower, so he ordered his skeleton warriors to gather the corpses of the lions near the gate. After all the corpses were gathered, Lin used the corpse explosion skill, and he destroyed the gate. He and his generals entered and were face to face with the tyrant lion, who was patiently waiting on its throne for the next person stupid enough to challenge him. From just a glance, Lin could tell that the lion tyrant was on a different level from all the other bosses he faced. The tyrant lion recognized Lin as his opponent, and it stood up from his throne and approached Lin. He towered over Lin, however Lin wasn't intimidated by its size. He instead wanted to end it quickly because he was running out of time. He ordered his skeletons to attack. The skeleton warriors under the commands of the generals quickly ran in. However, the lion tyrant used the raging jump strike to evade the skeleton warriors. And after landing back on the ground, the force of his landing managed to destroy 2 skeleton warriors. Lin summoned a couple more skeleton warriors and he ordered them to stop the tyrant lion. To help out, his skeleton mage with the lightning affinity used the Thunderblast skill, and the skill inflicted a short-term paralysis on the lion tyrant. However, the lion tyrant used the Fury Roar skill, removing the paralysis effect. Then it equipped itself with 2 giant axes. With its 2 giant axes, the lion tyrant used the mighty cyclone skill. The skill created a giant vortex, sucking in 24 skeleton warriors and destroying them. Lin was taken aback by the lion tyrant's power. With this attack, even a hunter with the knight profession wouldn't be able to withstand the tyrant's attack. Lin tried using the binding curse on the tyrant, however it quickly freed itself with the Fury Roar skill, and it proceeded to destroy 14 more skeleton warriors. Even Lin's skeleton armor couldn't withstand the force of the tyrant's skill, and it was destroyed within 2 seconds. The tyrant jumped in the air again using the raging jump strike skill, and this time he was aiming for Lin. Although Lin has the damage transfer skill, it would still be a big problem if he takes a hit like this. He could lose all of his skeleton warriors. Lin used the soul burn skill. The tyrant's skill deactivated and he fell to the ground. However, it quickly recovered from the fall and he killed 4 more skeleton warriors. Lin quickly realized that if he stopped using the soul burn skill, he would be in danger. He used the skill continuously, and he ordered his skeleton warriors to attack. 20 minutes later, the tyrant was almost dead. Lin ordered his mages to use their skills. With this, lion tyrant was defeated. Lin acknowledged the lion tyrant, saying it was the strongest boss he has ever fought. For defeating the lion tyrant, Lin received 2 million experience. The gold rank tyrant battle axe, the gold rank tyrant long sword, the gold rank tyrant magic staff, and the tyrant heart. Lin leveled up and he reached level 21. This completely shocked him because he had forgotten that he was close to leveling up. The summon skeleton mage skill also leveled up. Lin was excited because this means if he could master his skills, they will get to the point where they level up as he levels up. He concluded that he should quickly raise the levels of the rest of his skills, otherwise it's going to get difficult for him to level them up later on. It seems he must return to the Tyrant Desert and use the Oasis fruits to level up the rest of his skills. Inside the dungeon hall, the other students had gathered around because the bell rang 6 times. It's been a long time since they last heard the bell ring 6 times, so they were curious. One of the students, Bai Lai Sheng, the grandson of the owner of Bai Lai Academy, says the bell must be signaling that the Bai Lai Academy party has set a new record in the Desert Tyrant dungeon. Another student says he remembered that Lin also entered the large-scale dungeon, and he questioned if Lin was the one who set the record instead. Bai Lai wondered who Lin was, and he asked the other students if they knew which academy he attends. A student approached and informed him that Lin was recently admitted to Zia Jing Academy, and he has broken some dungeon records. They also told him that he entered the large-scale dungeon alone. Bai Lai burst into laughter. He says he didn't realize that there is someone stupid enough to enter a large-scale dungeon alone. Bai Lai couldn't stop laughing. He says Lin is dumb for entering a large-scale dungeon that requires 40 people alone. This irritated some of the Zia Jing Academy students, and they remind him that Lin has already set a new record for 2 dungeon, and he did that alone. Bai Lai says there is nothing great about setting 2 new records. He says Lin is at most level 20, and a large-scale dungeon isn't easy to clear, so this time the new record should definitely belong to Bai Lai Academy. A notification appeared in the dungeon hall informing the students that the Tyrant Heart has dropped, and will be on cooldown for 1 year. This shocked the other students because they heard a rumor that the heart only drops if you defeat the boss within an hour. They began doubting that Lin set the new record because even if Lin is strong, they thought it would be impossible for a level 20 to defeat the Lion Tyrant within an hour of encountering it. Bai Lai started laughing. He became even more certain that it was the Bai Lai Academy that set the new record, and he says the Bai Lai Academy will now also have a boss accessory. Another notification appeared informing the students that Lin has set a new clear record of 14 hours and 11 minutes. They were all in complete shock. As Lin exited the portal, they all looked at him in admiration, saying they never thought one person could solo clear a large-scale dungeon faster than a team of 40 people could. Bai Lai approached Lin and asked if he was the person he heard so much about. Lin ignored Bai Lai. Since he got the tyrant heart, he wanted to report it to Bai Yuan quickly. He quickly moved past Bai Lai, saying he was busy. The other students in the dungeon hall started laughing at Bai Lai, saying he must feel embarrassed after saying Bai Lai Academy would be the one to set a new record. This was definitely news that would spread through all the academies in the next few days. A while later, the students were still discussing about Lin. Lin entered the large-scale dungeon at level 20, meaning a level 20 hunter was able to solo clear a large-scale dungeon, and even set a new record. They finally realized that the necromancer profession was much more powerful than they realize. Inside Bai Yuan's office, Bai Yuan received a call from Lin. Bai Yuan answered the call, asking Lin if he was calling because he had trouble finding a team. Lin informed him that he had obtained the tyrant heart. However, Bai Yuan didn't hear him. He says he could recommend people Lin could form a party with. However, he quickly realized that Lin just said he obtained the tyrant heart. To confirm, he asked Lin if he heard correctly, and Lin told him again that he has obtained the tyrant heart. Bai Yuan was shocked. It hasn't been long since he assigned Lin the quest and he already obtained the tyrant heart. He asked Lin for his location, and Lin told him he was at the entrance to the dormitory building. Bai Yuan said okay and hung up on Lin. After Bai Yuan hung up, Lin received a notification. He learnt through the notification that because he set a new record in a large-scale dungeon, he received 500 credits and 30 contribution points. Lin thought the rewards were good, but he was disappointed because the rewards can only be given once. As he was entering the dormitory, Lin was suddenly being teleported by a spell. Lin was teleported to a strange place, and Bai Yuan and Meng were waiting for him. Lin greeted Meng. Meng told him that there was no need for formalities since he was an easygoing person. He asked Lin to take a seat. After Lin sat down, Bai Yuan asked him to show them the tyrant heart. Lin took the tyrant heart from his inventory, shocking Meng. Bai Yuan asked Lin if he cleared the desert tyrant dungeon by himself again, and Lin said yes. Bai Yuan asked how long it took him, and Lin said it took him 14 hours. This shocked Bai Yuan and Meng further. They looked at each other in disbelief. Meng started laughing, saying Bai Yuan has no choice but to fulfill his promise now. Bai Yuan agreed, and he took the cooldown talisman from his shirt and handed it to Lin. Lin was excited, because with the cooldown talisman he can grind for levels quicker. Bai Yuan asked Lin if he is planning to enter the creation seminary as fast as possible. Lin told Bai Yuan that was his plan, but he still needs a lot of contribution points. The 3 new dungeon clear records only gave him 90 contribution points, and to enter the creation seminary requires 1000, so he was a ways off. Lin asked Bai Yuan if he could give him access to the Abyss Battlegrounds. Before granting Lin access, Bai Yuan asked him if he thinks he is ready for it. If he can get access to the Abyss Battlegrounds, Lin would be able to get contribution points way faster than setting new records in the dungeon hall. He told Bai Yuan that he was ready, and Bai Yuan granted him access. He told Lin that he could go back to the dormitory and rest now. He says he would send Lin into the battlefield once the opening ceremony was over. Lin thanked Bai Yuan and he began heading back to the dormitories. After Lin was gone, Meng asked Bai Yuan if it would be alright to send Lin to the Abyss Battlegrounds so soon. Bai Yuan reminded Meng that Lin could already clear large-scale dungeons by himself. He says although Lin is only level 20, his skills far exceed some who awakened their profession for the second time. He told Meng that the best way to see what Lin is truly capable of is to send him to the Abyss Battlegrounds. Meng agreed, but he told Bai Yuan that he didn't tell Lin that humanity's greatest enemy is also in the Abyss Battlegrounds. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button.